Good afternoon. This meeting of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission will now come to order. Today is Wednesday, October 5th, and the time is, if I can get it off my, 2:56 p.m. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's begin with roll call. Vice Chair Freeman.
Here.
Vice Chair Herrera.
Here.
Commissioner McNulty.
Here.
Commissioner Sturts. We have a quorum. Other folks around the room today are legal counsel Joe Canefield and Mary O'Grady, our mapping consultant Willie Desmond. We have a court reporter Marty Herder, our chief technology officer Buck Forst, and in the back of the room we have Mr. Ray Bladine, our executive director, our public information officer, Stu Robinson, and a public affairs coordinator or outreach coordinator Karen, and anybody else that I'm missing? Okay, I think that's it. Our next item on the agenda after call to order is working on the legislative map, but I understand, I had hoped that actually the meeting could begin in my absence. I had a work commitment that I couldn't get out of, so I apologize for the lateness, but I thought the group, there'd be a quorum where you guys could begin public comment, but unfortunately we didn't have a quorum, so the meeting had to be delayed for the start. But I have a few folks here who would like to speak, so we thought we'd go ahead and just start with public comment now, and unless and if you'd prefer to wave me off and say you'd like to talk at the end of the meeting, that's fine too. But I'll just go ahead and read names and go from there. So let's see. Our first speaker is Patrick Kraus, Government Relations Director, City of Chandler from Maricopa County. Oh, sorry. It's Patrice? Yes. Sorry.
Madam Chairman, my mayor is on his way, and I just put my slip in case he couldn't be here, so he's like a mile away.
Okay, we'll come back to him.
Thank you.
Sarah Pressler, Mayor of the City of Flagstaff.
Good afternoon, Independent Redistricting Commission, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, and to the staff. Thank you for the opportunity to address you related to the legislative district maps. We want to emphasize to you on behalf of the City of Flagstaff, my name is Sarah Pressler, S-A-R-A-P-R-E-S-L-E-R, that there were two versions presented at the previous meeting on Monday when we got together. There was option 1 and option 2, and we provided the preference for option 2 over option 1 on behalf of the municipality. Last night we had a public meeting where again redistricting was on our public agenda before the City Council and the entire community, and streamed through 65,000 homes, 100,000 homes in the metropolitan area, to which the Council unanimously gave the thumbs up that version 2 is in a better direction for our region than version 1 for the following reasons. Number 1, compliance with the Voting Rights Act is essential. In particular, sections 2 and 5 should be at your attention, not only from the Navajo Nation, but across the state of Arizona. Second, compliance with the constitutional requirements is essential. We cannot compromise on the Constitution. And so it's important then that we look at the values placed and look at maps under the lens of the Constitution. Third, competitiveness. It's very important that either party or an independent have an opportunity to have a fair and meaningful electoral process in our district. We believe that the citizens are best represented at the end of the day by someone who is elected in the most competitive manner. Many of you may know, but If you don't, municipal elections are nonpartisan elections. You see, the best person moves forward. And so I can speak firsthand by sharing with you that competition is a good thing, and the ability to have an open dialogue and to be able to be responsive to multiple parties is important. And finally, communities of interest. Fellow commissioners and Madam Chair, tomorrow you'll be hearing in particular from chief executive officers and business leaders from the Flagstaff area, as well as Flagstaff 40, Chamber of Commerce representatives, and the municipality will be back tomorrow to emphasize to you the importance of not regressing in our representation of Native populations, the importance of having a map that is competitive, but at the end of the day, an importance to have a map that represents communities of interest. And for us, there have been multi-million-dollar significant investments from our municipality and from our business community to try to develop a meaningful and intentional economic agenda for our region that will benefit the entire state. So in a congressional district, we gather many communities of like interest, and in a legislative district, we can become more narrow. So we've had opportunity and we'll continue to consult with the Navajo Nation. The Hopi tribe should be here tomorrow, we expect, and just want to thank you for your engagement of the public, and on behalf of all citizens in the city of Flagstaff, we just want to reemphasize to you to focus on the Voting Rights Act, the Constitution, competitiveness, and communities of interest. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I would just note to the public, anybody who does plan to address us later this week, this is a special situation where we're doing public comment right now. Public comment will be at the end of the meeting the next few days, so just so you can plan accordingly.
Thank you.
Leonard Gorman, Executive Director of Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission, Madam Chair, and people in the audience listening on the internet. I just want to express two things. First is the maps that were published on Monday. The options 1 and 2, 8As. Navajo Nation has very strong concerns about option 1, 8A, primarily because it does not meet the Voting Rights Act requirement threshold for the current district, legislative district 2. That is the source of our very strong concerns. Second, the Navajo Nation respectfully requests of the Commission to perhaps give the Navajo Nation and the City of Flagstaff the opportunity to come to some resolutions over some concerns and as to the option 2, 8A concerns. And we have been diligently making the effort to work on perhaps some alternative opportunities to come to some resolution on over some of the issues, as Navajo has strong concerns about the community of interest over the competitiveness, and we understand and appreciate and respect the City of Flagstaff's concerns with regards to assuring competitiveness also be a part of their iteration. So we'd like to have the opportunity to come together with the City of Flagstaff perhaps this evening or early tomorrow morning and bring back hopefully a map that would be of agreement and the Navajo Nation wishes to relieve the Arizona Indian Redistricting Commission from wrestling with concerns and issues in the northern part of the state of Arizona. So we'd like to make that request to the Commission and start with other areas of the map in the state of Arizona and give us that opportunity to come back in the morning. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jay Tibshraeny. Forgive my mispronunciation. Mayor, City of Chandler.
Good afternoon.
And if you could spell your name for the court report.
Yes, my name is Jay Tibshraeny, Mayor of Mesa. You want to know how to spell my first name, right? J-A-Y. Now, the easy name, Tibshraeny, is T-I-B as in boy, S-H-R-A-E-N-Y. I just learned how to spell it recently. So. Anyway, thanks for letting me come and testify. I'll try and be brief. And thank all of you for your work. I don't know if you all realized what you were getting into here. I followed this real close 10 years ago when when that process occurred, and it's time consuming, so I'm sure that the pay is worth it, but thank you for doing it. I was going to testify on the legislative map. Our preference is option 2. And it's by far and away our preference is option 2 in Chandler. It's more compact for our community. It protects our community and the communities of interest within our community, including our older areas of the city that have large minority populations. Under this option, we are not as diluted by other municipalities as we are in the other option. This will make it more likely that somebody from Chandler has an opportunity at least to be elected, contrary to the other map. And as the 4th largest city in the state of Arizona, that is important to us. So those are my comments on the legislative map, and I know you guys are taking feedback. And then the only comment I would like to make on the congressional map that has been passed and is now receiving input from the citizenry, given that how that map has turned out, I think Chandler has a lot more in common with the competitive district, and we're broken up into 2 now, but I would be very happy if all of Chandler was in the competitive district. I think it's more in line with my community and the way my community interacts in the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Much, sir.
Our next speaker is Arch McCoyle. McGill, sorry, that's a G. Representing self from Maricopa.
Yes, I'm a resident of Desert Mountain in northern Scottsdale, and I far prefer option 2. It doesn't appear to me that the community of interest in option 1 is correct. We have much more in common with the surrounding communities of Carefree, we are in Scottsdale, and Cave Creek. And so I far prefer, and the people I have talked to in Desert Mountain far prefer option 2. As it relates to the congressional districts, I just don't understand how you have broken that up. I've not had an opportunity to study it in any great depth, but just looking at the squiggles on the map, it just doesn't make sense to me, and I would like to understand what the logic is of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, can you spell your name for the court reporter, please?
My real name is Archibald, A-R-C-H-I-B-A-L-D. My last name is McGill, M-C-G-I-L-L.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Moher Sidwa, representing self from Tucson.
Although I wasn't here Monday, I was paying attention by internet. One of the maps, and I think it may have been option 2, I don't know enough about Maricopa County, but I do know my own city, Tucson. And in one of them, the center of Tucson seems to have been split apart into more than one district. And I don't think that's appropriate because that's where we have downtown. Right next to that is the university. Right next to that is where the professors live, I think Sam Hughes neighborhood. And kind of you go north, again we're talking about UMC. And basically that area is a community of interest from an economic sense and with regards to the intellectual give and take that is required in a university area. And also with regards to, I guess, education funding, university funding, all that stuff, I really do think that the core of Tucson should not be broken up. Yes, we do need to find population someplace. The other problem I had with that particular one, we have 2 very delightful natural boundaries as per the Constitution. We have a river and we have I-10. So we seem to have kind of part of that one District 10 is what I'm talking about, seems to go north of river quite a bit into a completely different area. A lot of retirees over there, and then you have, the university also down south. So I just wanted to suggest that you look at option 1. I think that was the McNulty option, I hope. I don't know my option, sorry. But whatever that option was, but the one where the university area is part of the center of Tucson, not the one that goes all the way north of River Road. That one was kind of frightening. Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll have to figure out which option I'm talking about because I was looking at the two options.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jim March, Second Vice Chair, Pima County Libertarians.
Hi, sorry about the long trek there. Folks, thank you. My name is Jim March. Last name is spelled same as the month. I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to help you, if I can, understand that you've been threatened with lawsuits a lot. And I've spoken before that I'm concerned that those lawsuits are creating undue pressure on this commission. You need to remember something that I learned a while ago from observing police misconduct cases. There's a strong presumption that what a public official does is legal unless it's proven very strongly otherwise. So your job is to come up with a set of maps. As long as you don't really seriously screw it up, the presumption is going to be that you did the job you were given. You were also created as an independent commission that is supposed to mean independent of the normal state's political power structure. And if you are now currently upsetting the political power structure, guess what? It means you're doing your job right. We now finally have some emails floating around, and they're available on Steve Muratori's website, among other places, linking finally, officially, if you want to call it that, Fair Trust and David Can't Tell Me Who Pays the Bills and those guys to the state's power structure. There's no question. Russell Pierce and that whole crowd behind him from day one. Now we finally know that once and for all. And I understand they're upset with you. Cool. Excellent. Means you're doing it right. You can't get sued for doing your job. And if you do your job, and one last thing is I really do hope that you make the DOJ clearance the first time. Try hard, guys, because if you do that, it will put a quash on a lot of the legal pressures you're facing. So really push that one hard. The last thing I want to say is I think the idea of taking District 1 on the congressional map and linking it to the border all right in a tiny little chunk out in right field is a good idea, because when people elect a politician to that district, if they want to elect somebody who pays attention to border issues, he'll have that extra little bit of clout he might want for that issue in Congress to say, yeah, I'm a border congressman. He'll have that option. And that's really all that matters, because border issues affect all of Arizona, at least all the way up through Maricopa County. Because the largest land-based drug smuggling corridor in America right now is the Nogales, Tucson, Phoenix corridor. From there, drugs go all over the place. But that's the area mostly affected by border areas, and all those politicians should care if they serve the people of those areas. But by producing, at least on paper, a third district without completely rejiggling the whole south end of the state, I think you've done a pretty good compromise in that area. So, chin up. Don't worry so much about the pressure. Get her done. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Susan Leeper, representing Self from Scottsdale.
I'd like to start with a quote that was in today's newspaper, Arizona Republic. This is from Stuart Rothenberg, a national political analyst who publishes the nonpartisan Washington, D.C.-based Rothenberg Political Report. He says, "It is a map with significant partisan implications. It really helps Democrats and screws Republicans. This was just a wholesale redrawing of the state, and I think the Democrats have to feel really good about that." That's the way I feel too. I'm here to discuss the division of Scottsdale into several legislative districts, but before I do that, I first wanted to mention something I heard, that there was another, quote, off the record exercise between two commissioners recently to redraw the congressional district maps, again in violation of the open meetings rule. I don't know why this is allowed to continue to happen. Scottsdale is basically a rectangular city situated on a north-south plain and is well-functioning, cohesive suburban city with a total population of less than 203,000. The city council runs as 6 at-large districts because the citizenry favors good governance for all, not catering to special interests who might choose to carve out a district. I have concerns especially about the strategy to cut Scottsdale in such a way that this carve-out cuts into Russell Pierce's current district so that Randy Perez can run against him in the next cycle. The population of Scottsdale is made up of almost half transplants from Chicago, New York, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. These are hardly Republican areas, but people repeatedly testify about Democrats being a minority. For state legislative purposes, a few streets have been shaved off the southern part and a few off the northwestern part. These areas adjoin areas with commonality of topography and do not snake and ramble. If population growth is such that a few more streets should be shaved off, keep things limited and compact, and keep the core of Scottsdale whole by running the LD border to border from east to west. Keep the north-south core intact. The current map slices and dices Scottsdale with scalpel-like precision, snaking it east-west to include commercial and light industrial areas, different school districts, different police, fire, and sanitation districts. To date, the commission has held few, if any, hearings in Scottsdale, yet our small city is being butchered. Why? What are you doing to us? I feel like Scottsdale is the bad boy in the neighborhood. One can only conclude that this is gerrymandering to disenfranchise the citizens of Scottsdale and stifle our voices. It's a sad commentary indeed.
Our next speaker is Joshua Coffenhartz, maybe? Oh, yay, thank you. Representing self from Scottsdale.
Good afternoon, Madam Commissioner, fellow commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak. I had a map to present. I didn't know if now would be, last name is Offenhartz. Sure. I had a map to present. I gave it to Mr. Desmond, and I've got hard copies. Is that something that I can present to you now?
How long is the presentation?
Very quick.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
So as I said, my name is Joshua Offenhartz, and I'm a resident of Scottsdale and a native Arizonan. I have come before you today to present a legislative map which I believe reflects the stated interest of this commission and residents of the metro portions of the Northeast Valley. This map works with either option 1 or option 2. Our goal is to get accurate and constitutional requirements for the Northeast Valley. Before I begin, and in the spirit of transparency and openness, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born downtown in Phoenix at Good Samaritan Hospital and grew up in North Phoenix before moving to Tucson, where I attended Sabino High School and the University of Arizona. Bear down, go Wildcats. Upon graduation, I made my way back to Phoenix to begin a master's degree in public administration at Arizona State University, which I completed this summer. It was during my final semester at ASU when I became aware of the Independent Redistricting Commission and the redistricting efforts. I began attending meetings to gain a first-hand perspective for a paper that I happened to be writing about the unique nature of Arizona's redistricting process nationwide. As you have noticed, I liked what I saw, and I've continued to attend many of the Valley's meetings and watched others via live stream. As a young professional interested in Arizona's future, politics, and government, I have no problems to you admitting that I have volunteered, interned, and worked for both political parties in the state of Arizona. My goal for public service has always been to make Arizona a better place to live. I am a product of our state's education system. I have struggled to start a career, and one day I love and hope to begin my family and raise it right here in Arizona. I don't have a political agenda, just a genuine concern for the state's future and my community's representation for the next 10 years. So now I'll get to my map. This map is specifically designed for the Northeast Metro region and was based on the 6 criteria in Prop 106, testimony from the commissioners, such as commissioners as yourself, and comments and wishes from the general public, which I've observed and heard during my time at the meetings. I've spent considerable time reaching out to anyone and everyone, and I do mean anyone and everyone, that wanted to give input. This includes, but is no way limited to, ordinary residents, homeowners, business owners, local school board officials, local elected officials, and really anyone else that got a hold of my cell phone number and wanted to chat. As you can see on the map, our main goal here was to keep Scottsdale as whole as possible. Mayor Lane has come out and spoken about the north-south access and how that is critical, and likewise keeping the community of interest. I think that the maps that have been presented so far, I agree with some of the comments, really do disenfranchise Scottsdale voters. It separates them into at least 2, but up to 4 different regions. And like everyone has said before, this is a community that has its own interests. I agree with making 2 districts that are cut east-west as opposed to north-south. And I would argue that districts up here that I have as 23 and 24 represent communities of interest. In the sake of this map, I'd say that it works well with some of the other presentations that you've been given. And like I said, it does work with options 1 and options 2 that you yourselves have worked on. Considering the fact that neither of these 4 districts, but specifically 24 and 23, are minority-majority districts, we can not disregard, but we didn't have to weigh in the Hispanic population as a factor, although it is nearly 20% in both districts. And on top of all of these lines, which really do keep Scottsdale whole, they are relatively competitive. I admit that I have the public version of strategic telemetry and the mapping software, which doesn't give me as good of analytics as you have, but based on the 2008 and 2010 numbers for legislative races, they were within 7 points both years. Since this commission has not voted on a definition, I felt while that wouldn't be as competitive as I'd like to see, it has been in the range that you've accepted as possible. What we wanted to do was also go into the Northeast Valley, and the reasons for that were several of the maps that you have, especially in the Cave Creek, Carefree, North Phoenix area, break into different school districts. They separate different communities, specifically, I'm blanking, I'm sorry. It's intimidating up here. But there are some school district splits in the North Phoenix and the Scottsdale areas. In the Scottsdale proper, as the legislative map 2 shows, you would be breaking up that Scottsdale school district. You know, those are places where I've went to school, where I've got little siblings going to school, and it really, you know, it's a community. So I won't take up too much more of your time, but I hope that if you do, as you move ahead with the legislative process, that you'll give serious consideration to these ideas and really work to keep Scottsdale and the Northeast Valley whole, and also with a metro focused. The rural communities to the north, as has been testified, have different interests immediately, and then also as we look ahead 10 years. And I think that those are important differences that need representation. The last thought I'll leave you with is something that I've seen and I've observed here. As we move into the legislative process and as we think 10 years ahead, I think it's critically important to disregard D's and R's and, you know, really focus on Arizona. Republicans and Democrats in Scottsdale and in Tucson and in South Tucson and in Yuma and in Bisbee, they have different interests. And if we focus on the letters D and if we focus on the letters R, we're not going to hear the voices of the different interests, whether it's business or border or farming or cattle ranching or metro or rural. So I really hope that you'll keep that in mind as we specifically focus on the legislative maps, that just because it's a DR split does not mean that Ds and Rs have the same agenda and have the same interests. And with that, thank you for your time, and I look forward to today's meeting.
Thank you for the input. Our next speaker is Brandon Gavino, representing Self from Phoenix.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Do you need my spell my name? Gavino. Sorry, not that great at public speaking. Basically, first I want to just say thank you to the commission. You guys are doing a real good job. I know you guys are getting a lot of criticism for doing a lot of different things. You're getting lawsuits from all these people. You know, press releases are flying out saying that, you know, you guys are all partisan. You're not doing what's best for Arizona. I mean, even though the votes are coming down and look like they're partisan, I'm sure that, you know, y'all have some basic agreement there, and it's not, you know, like some people are saying where, you know, Republicans are being completely disenfranchised by the Democrats on the commission or vice versa. Anyways, I just wanted to come here today because I was following the Monday meeting online, and basically, you know, we started out with a map Monday morning, and then it very quickly moved to a very different map, well, for my community, which is in North Phoenix. And I think there's an issue that I'd like to comment for the commission for. On Monday, a gentleman commented that the Anthem community had more in common with the Cave Creek than being placed in the district that included the Northwest Valley communities of Surprise and Sun City. But I believe the same holds true for my neighborhood, which is the Sonoran Foothills development in North Phoenix. in the new Monday map, Anthem was moved into District 6, and the Sonoran Foothills neighborhoods east of I-17 and south of Carefree Highway were added to District 8. I have more interest with the District 6 folks of Tremonto and actually the rest of my neighborhood, which is 1,000 yards south with my community association pool and tennis courts and stuff like that. It's in a completely separate district, the District 6. I'm in District 8. Basically, I think our community is more closely aligned with the interests in District 6 because the majority of our association resources and basically the entire rest of our community is in District 6. We're cut off as a little slice coming out of there. Our issues in our neighborhood are the same that are a quarter mile north in Tremonto. They're the same that's a quarter mile south in you know, the rest of the Sonoran Foothills neighborhood. And even the maps, we're in the same city council district. We're in, you know, we're in the same state legislative district. In the current maps we proposed for the state legislature, we're also in the same district there. And I just think that our community, our neighborhood, is better served by being placed in District 6. I mean, I-17 has been a divider between the Northwest Valley and the Northeast Valley that since I can remember. I mean, whenever you said, oh, Northwest Valley, usually you're talking about something west of the 17. But, you know, we're kind of thrown in there with them. Anyways, I just wanted to thank the commission for its time in hearing my comments. I'm sorry if I was fast and a little informal, but thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Gavino, you mentioned the Tremonto?
Yes.
Could you spell that?
Tramonto, I believe.
And is that a neighborhood?
Yeah, it's a community that's just north of Carefree Highway right off the I-17.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jesus Rene Lopez Jr., representing Self from Chandler.
Hello. I just wanted to express my interest in that I would like the priority to be community of interest over a lot of the other requirements. I know there are a myriad of them. However, being from Chandler and seeing some of the previous proposed maps, I really appreciate the Commission's flexibility in retaining most of Chandler with Maricopa and some of the other historical legislative districts. I have reviewed the maps recently, but in not knowing where true city boundaries lie, cannot comment on them yet, but I do want to express that community of interest being my priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kenneth Dowland from Maricopa.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to address you. I only have three simple things to say. Number one is I appreciate a lot of work that you have done. I've been to previous meetings and I've read in the paper and you're working really hard, and I appreciate that on our behalf. Secondly, I appreciate the opportunity to take the little online instruction on the map drawing, and I will concede I got lost right away. And so I will leave that up to the experts. But I would like to tell you my experience, though, as a person coming to Arizona 6 years ago. We were not involved at all in what was going on in politics until about 3 years ago, and we met a candidate that we thought we could respect and we could support and get energized, and we worked really hard on a campaign, only to find out that we live in a non-competitive district. And I do feel it's very important for us to have competitive districts, because two things happen that I think are behind the scenes. One of them, after working very hard for this candidate and never having the opportunity to see the other two opponents, because there were 2 seats, there were 3 candidates, 2 from one party and 1 from the other, and obviously mine was from the other party. I was astonished that I had no opportunity, because the 2 candidates from the major party didn't bother to come to community meetings and senior forums, didn't bother to come to the debate, the televised debate, didn't bother to tell us they weren't going to come to the debate. And it was very frustrating to find out that unless you're in the inner group running these non-competitive districts, there's virtually no way to have any influence, to meet them even. I went to the Capitol building a couple times hoping I could meet some, but I did not have that opportunity. I found that very devastating, because my entire adult life after voting age has been involved in understanding and communicating and believing that involvement is critical. And so I was just really, and our friends and the people were just like, wait a minute, this isn't right. So I appreciate this opportunity, the hard work you're doing to try to make this a better state.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, sir, do you mind spelling your name for the record, last name?
I put that down as first thing to do, but Kenneth, Kenneth, Dowlin, Dowlin.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brad Lundahl from the city of Scottsdale.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, and I even made notes to spell my name this time too, because I forgot last time. Last name is Lundahl, Lundahl, and I'm representing the city of Scottsdale today. We took a look at the maps, the current legislative district maps, and we noticed that at least in one district, legislative district 23, that there was essentially a urban-rural split of this district. And while we appreciate that Scottsdale was kept to, I think, 3 districts, I think to satisfy the communities of interest requirement, that it would probably be better to drop off some of those rural areas. One of the areas I think even goes into a north piece of Mesa. Again, that's what we feel might not be a community of interest to Scottsdale residents. And we feel that for at least 2 districts, these should be core Scottsdale districts. And we would suggest that instead of being out west of Scottsdale, out into the rural areas, that you instead move the boundaries towards, out to the east. I've got everybody lost now. That you move the boundaries more towards the west and in towards Paradise Valley, in towards Phoenix, and more closer to the 51 corridor. The Scottsdale communities have much more in common with these areas. They look very similar, the demographics are similar. These are some of the few areas where you're driving and you can't really tell you're in one community or the other, but you know you're in a community that is similar. So with that, again, we would ask that that these be looked at, and if changes could be made, that's what our request would be, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
And I did note the map that was up earlier is more towards what we were thinking.
Okay. Do we know which, I don't know which map that was, but.
The map that was just up a minute.
Oh, that the gentleman just presented?
Yeah,
Okay, great.
as far as I could tell, that was much closer to kind of what we were thinking.
Perfect.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Emily Vertigo, representing Self from Pinal County.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Emily Verdugo, V as in Victor, E-R-D-U-G-O. And I've been following the process. I've been attending meetings and watching via live stream when I can. But lately, I've noticed something disturbing to me. Some hired attorneys have stood here almost at every meeting to list their objections. And they usually begin with comments like, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. I am not a hired attorney. I am a citizen of this great state who wants to go on the record to highlight that by creating truly competitive districts, this commission achieves the greatest good for the greatest number of people. The voters adopted this process to empower me, an engaged citizen, to have a voice, not hired guns representing entrenched special interests. This attorney represents the Fair Trust, and his entire reason to be before this body is to be a bully, to call out objections, and disrupt your work so his statements can be used for legal challenges. The motivation behind this group is to maintain the status quo. Fair Trust attorneys want to derail your work of balancing multiple interests. Please understand, there is a natural, cultural, economic, and historical link that runs from the rocks of the Grand Canyon to the four corners of this state. The counties of Apache, Navajo, Coconino, and Yavapai make up roughly 334,000 of the voting age of this district. This is balanced with the 375,000 voting age population from Pinal, Pima, Graham, Greenlee, Gila, and Cochise. Pinal County, under this scenario, has the largest concentration of voting age population, the proposed Congressional District 1. This district is truly competitive. Voter registration figures need to be evaluated because as the Commission's index on competition, this district is at 50-50. In 2008, President Obama lost this district. This map is not perfect, but it does achieve the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. Again, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lynn Breyer, representing Self from Scottsdale.
Thank you. My last name is spelled B-R-E-Y-E-R. It's been my experience, and I've lived way too long already, that in these kinds of situations, a commission such as your own can do one of three things. You can either make everybody equally miserable with your decisions, which means you're probably doing your job, or you can make everybody equally happy, which you're doing your job and also creating a miracle, or you can make one group extremely happy and another group extremely unhappy, in which case you're not doing your job. And that's what I see happening here, that you are making one group extremely happy and another group extremely unhappy. And I was interested in the early comments about the Rothenberg report because that seems obvious to people outside of the state. So I think that if you really are interested in doing your job the way the voters intended you to do in Prop 106, that you will reconsider some of these decisions that you've made along the lines of the map. I'd like to just comment quickly on the congressional map. And I live in both Scottsdale and Pine Top up in the White Mountains. And the Congressional District Map 1, you have created a map that is truly ridiculous. We have a ridiculous map now that doesn't work. And now you're going to give us another ridiculous map that doesn't work. And I do not understand why the new map includes urban areas and rural areas, which have absolutely no common interests. And I'd also like to know why this map wraps around and picks up the casino area of Pinal County, which is definitely has no community of interest with the rural areas that make up most of this map. And you've cut Cochise County in half, and my friends in Cochise County are very annoyed about this because they have a community of interest that's being split up. So I would like to ask you to please reconsider this map. I understand, I was here on Monday, I saw it as a ramming this map through without allowing at least all of the commissioners to review this map in detail, and I do not think that is the way the citizens of Arizona expected this to happen. I'd also like to comment on the legislative map. As regards Scottsdale, we have a community interest as a city. We have now 3 different districts, which has created all kinds of havoc with residents who don't know what district they're even in because their neighbor 1 street over is in a completely different district. We have a community of interest, we have a common government, we have common shopping, we have common everything. And so to divide the city of Scottsdale up, which is not exactly a huge metropolitan area, into 3 or more sections makes absolutely no sense from a community of interest standpoint. We also have a strong community interest with the city of Fountain Hills. We are in that district now that has been a competitive district in the past. My neighborhood, my precinct where I live is almost equally 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 registration. So I think that's pretty competitive. So to break that up into pieces to satisfy some weird, unexplained objective, it makes absolutely no sense to me. So I would respectfully ask that you keep the city of Scottsdale in one whole piece and also include Fountain Hills, which the 2 cities are practically one. They have grown together and they share everything together. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Liberti from Fair Trust.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, good afternoon. That's Michael Liberti, L-I-B-U-R-D-I, representing the Fair Trust. And I'm here to give a few comments. I've heard some today about legal challenges and whatnot. You know, I agree with them. I agree with those comments. I think it would be nice if we could come up with consensus maps. I think it would be nice if all stakeholders could get together and come up with compromise maps. I think it would be nice if Mr. Freeman and Mrs. McNulty could come up with compromise maps that make everybody happy. You're not gonna please everybody 100% of the time, but if you could please everybody a little bit, that's something that we could all go home with and be proud with. But unfortunately, based on what came out of this commission on Monday, that doesn't seem to be the case. Fortunately, that is, there's time to correct some of the problems. I'm not going to go into those. We've heard some today. You will sure to be hearing about them in the future. So again, I strain to see how that congressional district map is anything other than a gerrymander. There are a few good points with Mrs. McNulty's option 2. I do agree with much of what's in here. I agree with much of what's in Mr. Freeman's map. Some things that I fail to comprehend in option 2, version 8A, is how the commission could justify breaking apart LD 11, which is probably one of the most historically competitive districts that the former IRC drafted. That district has had split representation for most of the past 10 years. And what it does is it slices and dices LD 11, bringing its southern border, or dividing it into 2, bringing its southern border down to Van Buren Street. And it's very difficult to see how there could be any community of interest there by dividing it north and south like that, when that district should be kept very much intact, similar to the way it was. Of course, changes need to be made, but why tinker with something that hasn't been broken? Again, another example, proposed LD 15. Why are we putting Cave Creek, Carefree, Anthem, New River in with a rural district? These are growth areas in North Phoenix. They've traditionally been in with Phoenix area legislative districts. They've had good representation, and that should continue. It does not make sense to gerrymander them out of Maricopa County. One final example, proposed LD 11. We've heard a lot of testimony over the past several months that residents of Oro Valley, residents of Saddlebrook, and residents of a portion of Marana would like to stay in Tucson. Yet this map proposes putting them with Casa Grande. They specifically asked this commission to keep them out of Pinal County to the extent possible. So let's see if we could come up with a compromise. There needs to be time to study these maps. The commissioners have put a lot of time into these maps. The public needs a chance to digest them, to see what better could be done. Let's come up with something where we could go to the comment period that everybody's happy with, and that we could hit the ground running for the next legislative elections. Because I will say this, and some people aren't going to be happy, but legal challenges are not off the table. We saw it last go around. There is a good chance that we could avoid it this go around, but if not, so be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jeannie McGill, representing Self from Maricopa. I don't see her. Oh, okay, thank you. So that was my last request to speak form. The time is 3:47. Do we want to take a quick break and then start up on the legislative? So it's 3:47. We'll take a 10-minute recess. Thanks. Okay, recess is over. We'll enter back into public session. The time is 4:17 p.m. And thank you all, public, for commenting and giving us your feedback and input. We appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is number 2, review, discussion, and direction to mapping consultant regarding the development of a legislative district's draft map based on constitutional criteria. And when we last met on Monday, we had started to go through 2 different versions of a legislative district map, one that Commissioner Freeman presented and one that Commissioner McNulty presented, and they kind of walked us through how they created each district, which was very helpful. And I believe there's been additional discussion when we last left on Monday that we all agreed our number 1 criteria is to comply with the Voting Rights Act, and so we want to ensure that the minority-majority districts are built into the map from the beginning, and that those benchmark levels are maintained, or let's just say maintained. So we wanted to make sure that we did that on both maps, and then we also talked about a process for how do we bring these 2 maps together. Is there a way to find common ground between the 2 versions and start to put that into a single map that we'll all work from? So that's kind of a recap of where we were, at least as of Monday afternoon. Have there been any new developments or anything that I missed from Monday?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if it's helpful, we can talk more about some of the voting rights issues and maybe kind of go around the state and do that.
That would be helpful.
And in terms of what you look at on the screen while we have the conversation, you kind of have 3 choices. You can look at the benchmark districts if you'd like to. You can look at either of the options that we discussed the other day. But I'll just go through and talk about the benchmark, about some of the benchmark analysis that we've been discussing with the mapping consultants. Starting in the northern part of the state, we have the Native American district that was a majority Native American voting age population. Right now, the benchmark is at 58.99 Native American voting age population. Note that at the time of preclearance, it was 62%. Also, just comparing in terms of the status of the benchmark district, it was 35,000 some people underpopulated. So the challenge up there is maintaining that benchmark Native American voting age population of 58.9% while making sure that it has enough population. And it's not that it's lost population, it's just hasn't grown at the rate of some others in the state. And the two alternatives that we looked at Monday took some different approaches, and we've also seen some proposals from the Navajo Nation in terms of how to maintain that benchmark. And my thought on that, frankly, other than kind of alert the issue, that should be the target to try and maintain that benchmark. Subject to, we are, as we've always said, doing more detailed analysis, but the sense is we should maintain that benchmark level. And it sounds like Flagstaff and the Navajo might be talking some more about some of that corner of the state, and we might get some more information, at least from their perspectives tomorrow. So we can talk more or just move on to a different part of the state. The next part of the state might highlight, in terms of the voting rights issues, southern Arizona. And in terms of the benchmarks in southern Arizona, and that's Tucson and southeastern and southwestern Arizona. We'll talk about them all together. There were two benchmark districts in the Tucson area, districts 27 and 29 under the old map. Oh, and if it's helpful in terms of perspective for the Native American district, again, it's old District 2, new District 7. In the Tucson area, there were two urban districts that were benchmarks, 27 and 29. Those are right now at the edge of being, they're like 49.89 Hispanic voting age population and 49.81 Hispanic voting age population. So they have, at the time of preclearance last time, they were both less Hispanic, 43% and 45% voting age Hispanic. And that's what, when we've looked at these demographics over the decade, we see a lot of just the Hispanic districts becoming kind of more Hispanic over the course of the decade. And that's certainly what happened in 27 and 29. Also, we had two areas that we looked at as a potential opportunity to elect under the benchmark in southeastern Arizona. The district that included parts of Cochise County, I believe that was 25, and 24 in southwestern Arizona was parts of Yuma. Right now, those districts, Yuma is now, District 24 is at 51% HVAP, although at the time of preclearance it was 41% HVAP, so it has had significant Hispanic growth. And in the southeastern District 25 remains under majority Hispanic voting age population. As far as so we had two urban districts and then two rural districts where there was some sort of opportunity to elect. Under the alternatives that were discussed Monday, they took different approaches to southern Arizona. The option 2 had 3 majority Southern Arizona, majority voting age Hispanic Southern Arizona districts, and those were in that map, districts 2, 3, and 4. 2, and this, when I say option 2, that was the one that Commissioner McNulty presented. 2 included parts of Tucson and then Santa Cruz County and the border communities in Cochise. 4 included the Tohono O'odham over to parts of Yuma County. And then 3 was in the urban area. And those were at the Hispanic voting age population in those districts. District 2 was at 61%, District 3 51%, and District 4 at 53% HVAP. And then Commissioner Freeman's map had also had 2 majority or close to it Hispanic voting age populations in southern Arizona, District 2 and District 3 at 54% and 49.7%. District 3 is the one that includes Yuma, and District 2 was Tucson proper district. So our recommendation, when we were talking and looking at the alternatives and the populations, was perhaps to look at trying to maintain 3 or create 3 Hispanic voting age population districts in southern Arizona, which seemed doable based on the options that we were looking at Monday. Moving up to Maricopa County, oh, and I guess stopping on the way through Pinal County. Pinal County, District 23 was an opportunity to elect district under the benchmark, but it was not, and it has never been, a minority district. At the time of pre-clearance, it had a Hispanic voting age percentage of 30%. Now it's at 28%, and that's a district that has had the explosive growth, almost doubled in size or more, in Pinal County. And so we're frankly not sure when we look at the map as to whether we're going to be able to preserve the opportunity to elect in that area, but it's worth at least looking at. We also caution that in looking at Pinal County minority districts, that's an area where the prison population can have an effect when you're building these legislative districts at these sizes, because they do have significant prison population in that area. And the mapping consultant does have a chart with some populations that can help with that analysis, so we'll be watching for that. Then moving up to Maricopa County, under the benchmark district, the 13, 14, and 16 were the majority Hispanic districts in Maricopa County under the benchmark. And I also note that District 16 has a substantial African American population, and substantial being about 15%, the more substantial than the other areas. And there's been an opportunity to elect African Americans in that district as well. So 13, 14, and 16 are the majority Hispanic voting age population districts under the benchmark. Those are the districts that when the Minority Coalition presented a map, those are essentially the districts that they focused on, because they presented us with 3 districts. Under the benchmarks, the Hispanic voting age population in 13 is 68%. In 14, 64.9%, and in 16 is 56.7%. But when you look at the combined minority, they're all around the same when you add everything up. In terms of other areas where there's an opportunity to elect under the benchmark, 15, 20, 13, was one that is right now a sort of plurality, has 38.46 under the benchmark, and for Hispanic voting age population, and the majority minority total is I believe it's just over 50% majority minority. I'll have to check that number, but that's an area in terms of the benchmark to look at as well. In terms of what the alternatives did that were presented Monday, Commissioner Freeman's alternative, which was option 1, created 4 majority Hispanic districts in the Maricopa County area, and those were, let me see if I can get the numbers right, 19, 27, 28, and 29. And in terms of how they compare to the benchmarks, 19 is sort of old 13, 27 is essentially old 16, 29 I'd say is old 14, and some of this is hard to compare. We're trying to look at sort of the heart of the district, and Willie may correct that. And then 28 was old 15, farther to the east. And let me see, Commissioner McNulty had 3 majority Hispanic districts, and those were Old District 14, which was District 20 in the McNulty map. There were some differences in numbering on that point. And then basically hers corresponded with the Minority Coalition map, for the most part there. There are also areas where people were maybe close to or within striking distance, it looked like, of an opportunity to elect. in western Maricopa County, and the McNulty map in the Tempe area and West Mesa area. And so those are all areas to look at. Our suggestion when we were pooling things and looking at both alternatives was to look at 4 majority Hispanic districts in the Maricopa County area to see if that's a possibility. With that, if you had 4 in Maricopa County, 3 in southern Arizona, and then preserve the Native American, that's 8 8 districts with the opportunity to elect. We've been talking about 9 or 10 benchmark districts. So again, as long as there's an opportunity to elect, it doesn't have to get to that majority HVAP number. So just look for a substantial minority and Hispanic population, and we're doing sort of election analysis. We've used, for example, that mine inspector race with the Hispanic candidate from 2010 as maybe a shorthand look, and take other shorthand looks to figure out if there's an opportunity to elect while we look at kind of drill down for more detailed analysis. In terms of the current, under the current benchmarks overall, they have 6 majority HVAP districts. And both the proposals that we looked at had 6 majority HVAP districts. They just were in different places. One option had one additional one in southern Arizona, and the other had an additional one in Maricopa County. So there are different ways to put these together to preserve the opportunity to elect in 9 and perhaps 10 legislative districts. So.
I hate to ask you this, but can you repeat on the McNulty map, which 3 were the majority, minority, and then what the old district is? Sorry. I have number 20, which was the old 14.
For Pima County or Maricopa?
Just in general, I thought.
Pima County, 2, 3, and 4 were the southern Arizona majority voting age Hispanic districts in the McNulty option 2 version 8A proposal. And frankly, I haven't matched them up or tried to match them up because to what they might correspond to in the previous maps, I think for Pima County.
Okay, then Maricopa is what I was.
Maricopa
You
is
started with 20 and said it's the old 14.
20, and then I think the other numbers are the same as in Commissioner Freeman's alternative. 19 was the old 13. Go ahead.
19 to 27.
Yeah, and 19 is the old 13, and 27 is the old 16.
Okay, thank you.
Sort of, you know. If we look at just 20, though, I'd like to. So you can see it's parts of. So the red line is Commissioner McNulty's. So you see there's parts of 12, parts of 13, and parts of 14, and a little part of 15, all included in that. And that's again because we didn't, you know, the previous legislative map is not a thing we've considered at all. You know, constitutionally required to start with the grid and work from there. So we haven't looked at the old map at all up until this point.
And Madam Chair, yeah, on that point, it's clear even though that's not how we draw the maps, we don't start with the old districts. When we do the voting rights analysis, we start with the old districts. So we thought to kick off that discussion, it would be helpful to look at that. And in talking to Bruce Adelson, also makes it very clear that, and if you read the old objection letter, that's what they're comparing it to. They're comparing it to the old districts and how you shifted population to create the new districts. The other thing we thought, while looking at this, sometimes it is helpful to sort of look at where the Hispanic population is. You know, you can color code that, and you can see where there might be some additional contiguous high Hispanic areas that aren't included in a majority-minority district. Or you might see some high white non-Hispanic areas that might be removed from some minority districts, again, to try and create the opportunities to elect.
Okay, any questions or comments on the voting rights analysis so far?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
Council, with respect to the Native American Voting Rights District, the commission has a letter from the chairman of the White Mountain Apache Tribe asking that his district maintain the status quo, and I think an expression of the wishes of that tribe, which I would interpret to be to not be included in a district with the Navajo Nation and the Hopi Nation. How is that statement to factor in our analysis?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeman. Commissioner Freeman's referencing a letter from Ronnie Lupe of the chair of the White Mountain Apache Tribe that's dated July 27th, 2011, and that says, as he indicated, that they go on record to maintain the status quo to the maximum extent possible. The reservation currently falls within 3 separate counties, yet we are one people devoted to the well-being of our tribal members. The present districting plan has served the tribe well. We have had both Democrats and Republicans elected to represent us, and all have served us well. And so that's what they have put in the record. In terms of how that affects the analysis, we still have an obligation not to retrogress in terms of Native American representation, and so if that means we need to include the White Mountain Apache, I think we need to include the White Mountain Apache, but there might be room for more, input along the way on that issue. But that's I think our view is that we need to maintain the current Native American population in that northern Arizona district.
And just following up on that, with respect to the growth of Native population in the state versus the growth of non-Native segment of the population of the state, does that factor in? I mean, the Native growth, I believe it was about 2%, while everyone else grew at about, the rest of the state grew at about 25%. How does that factor into the analysis?
And I invite Joe to chime in if he'd like, if because of the population growth, you really just can't get there, you really can't create the majority Native American district, then you're not obligated to. And there's some, and you just have to, that's part of your burden of proof at Department of Justice. The issue here would be, however, that we have proposals like the Navajo Nation plan that does not retrogress, that does keep that benchmark level. So I'm not convinced we could meet our burden of proof on that point because because of those alternative plans.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeman, I'll just, in the Department of Justice guide to redistricting that they published before every cycle and update, they talk about situations where retrogression may be unavoidable due to population decreases, such as you're suggesting. I'll only note that the guidance from the Department of Justice is that in those circumstances, the submitting jurisdiction seeking pre-clearance of such plan will bear the burden of demonstrating that a less retrogressive plan cannot reasonably be drawn. So it certainly is possible, but of course the burden will be on the Commission to establish that a less retrogressive plan could not have been drawn.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
In addition to that particular district, I like to focus on the one in the Yuma area. I think Commissioner McNulty's map has it as 4 and 14, broken up into 2. One of the reasons I think this particular version of the legislative map follows very closely the congressional version for that area. And one of the reasons why we ended up splitting it that way, not only based on public comments, but also that particular area, the northern part of Yuma, that is currently broken up into 14, has about, I'm going to say 63,000 in Northern County. And we broke it up in the congressional district because even out of 710,000 or so, we feel that that particular area creates a racially polarized voting for the people in the South. I mean, there's such a distinction between the southern part of Yuma and the northern part of Yuma that I think that splitting them in half makes sense. The people, southern part of Yuma, Somerton, Gadsden, San Luis, have the ability to elect someone of their choosing, and including the northern population, was around 63,000, would really prevent them from doing that. So I think I want to be careful when we start lumping them together. And like Commissioner Chairwoman Mathis, I want to pass preclearance on the first try. And I think Commissioner McNulty is correct in the way she has them out, split them in half. And I think we need to look at that and take that into consideration. Again, if you want to pass preclearance, I think that's to me, that's one of the areas that I do want to look at, and making sure that we do not combine them.
Any other comments?
I do think those are some fairly substantial conceptual differences between the two approaches. And I don't know if we want to go around and talk about those individually or talk about them generally.
Well, it gets to that whole process question of what's the best way to build a map that brings in elements of both of these. And what's, and I think the only way to do it is to grind it out in a meeting and talk about it with each one. But it sounds like we don't have all the input yet for the northeast corner from the Navajo Nation. So I'm wondering, though, if we could, start to address some other parts of the state.
And Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Are we planning on focusing on the majority minority districts first?
I think that would make some sense, given it's kind of the number one thing that we need to comply with federal requirements. So,
Sure. And Madam Chair, although the information, there's still some information that they will be providing to us. This is the Navajo Nation and the City of Flag. I still think that that their comments are pretty clear that they did not want to be included in the same district in the legislative map. So that, to me, I think we need to honor that and keep them in separate legislative districts as Commissioner McNulty's map does.
you mean Flagstaff and Navajo Nation?
That is correct. And then putting the tribes together that share, they have a share interest, combining them and trying to raise that voting strength to as close to 60% as possible. I think we can do that. I think I understand that the population didn't grow much in that area, but I still think we can include as many of the Native American population in that one district to increase the that particular district to the population requirements, and make up the voting, the rest of the population with areas that won't prevent the Native American people from electing someone of their choice.
My perspective on that is that, as I understand it, the Navajo Nation and Flagstaff are talking about particulars of how the boundary would work, perhaps between the legislative districts that would encompass Flagstaff and the Navajo Nation. So I'll set that aside. But I do think it's important not to retrogress and to honor the request to put the tribes together in one district. They have, Mr. Gorman talked about that a little bit when he was here last time, and we heard quite a bit about it at the Heard Museum. The individual tribes have particular concerns, but they also have huge overriding issues that they share in common. Things like maintaining their cultural identity, protecting their religious beliefs and practices, dealing with health issues, dealing with educating their children, and maybe more than anything else, relevant to the whole issue of state legislative districts, protecting their sovereignty. And I think that the whole issue of not retrogressing below the benchmark is critical to all those things, to ensuring that they maintain the ability to elect the representative of their choice who can represent be a strong voice for them at the legislature. So it would be it's my perspective that we should follow the framework that has the Navajo, the Hopi, the San Carlos, and the White Mountain Apache together in a legislative district.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I do believe that option 2 does a better job of reflecting the current interests of the Navajo Nation and the American Indian tribes in that area. So at least I think we can build around that with that option 2 and see how we can come to an agreement that we need to respect the Voting Rights Act and respect the wishes of the Native American tribes by building or constructing a district that will meet the constitutional requirements. I think there's really no way around it. I mean, we can make, and I understand the population didn't grow as much, but again, I think our attorney, Joe Canfield, said it clearly, and said it Mary O'Grady, that we have the burden to prove that we're not retrogressing that area. So I think it would be easier and wiser if we build a district that meets that requirement.
Mr. Freeman, do you have any thoughts on if we, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The district reflected in option 1, reflected my understanding of the wishes of the White Mountain Apache tribe to keep their district relatively intact, to also include the Yavapai Apaches living in Camp Verde, so that district includes it. It also reflects the public comment that I took in from our public comment hearing at the Honda Resort outside of Pine Top, where we had a lot of members of the public discuss their communities of interest, their desire to stay separate from Flagstaff and distinct from them, their desire to stay linked with the White Mountain Apache and San Carlos Apache tribes. That was the basis for the formulation of the district in option 1.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I would agree with Commissioner Freeman's comments if Flagstaff is included with the Navajo Nation, but if Flagstaff is included in its own district, I think the wishes of those tribes, the White Mountain Apache, San Carlos Apache, those interests would be met if Flagstaff is not included in that same district, but they are included with the Navajos and the Hopis. So their interests would be met if we do what Commissioner McNulty was proposing by not including the city of Flagstaff, which would dilute the voting power of the Native Americans if they are included. So I think that particular option 2 version for that district, I think it comes closest to meeting those requirements.
Maybe we should start down in the southeast corner instead of the northeast corner.
I'd be happy to talk about Southern Arizona a little bit also.
It might make some sense until we receive these formal proposals. I know we did get the White Mountain Apache letter, and it would be good to also get the Navajo input before carving that corner of the state up. So yeah, let's jump down to number 1, at least on these draft maps. I mean, sorry, they're really what-if scenarios. They're not even a draft map. We've got Cochise Hole in Mr. Freeman's map, mostly whole in Ms. McNulty's. And it looks like they both kind of split Santa Cruz in a similar manner, at least along the border. Or no, they don't. This is a county line, I guess. So the McNulty map, it's whole, is that right?
Santa Cruz County would be whole, and it would be in District 2.
And it goes into Cochise along the border.
Is there a map you want me to put up, either option 1 or option 2, or should I leave the
Maybe you should have
legislative up?
both. But
I
we
mean,
flip between, or is that even possible?
Well, it is, like right now we have the current district up, and then I guess the red line would be option 2, Commissioner McNulty's map, and then the blue line would be option 1, Commissioner Freeman's map. It might be easier, though, if we get rid of the current and just put one of those as the bottom and one at the top. I don't know how you want to decide, if you want to flip a coin, or how you want to do it. Which one should be the base?
I think it's easier to go back and forth. I find it really tough to.
Yeah.
Put option 1 as the base. You can go back and forth that way.
Yeah, I'll put option 1 as the base. And I'll add option 2 as a layer to it, so we'll have the outline at least. And let me know if there's a color that works particularly well for you. I think red seems to stand out pretty well. Blue sometimes. They all kind of get washed out depending on where they are. Okay. We're going to southern Arizona. Do you want to start in Pima and Cochise and some of those areas?
Yeah, along 1.
Okay. So I know this is tough. So the black line is Commissioner Freeman's option 1 map. So District 1, you can see, is Cochise, Santa Cruz County, and then part of Pima. And that's District number 1 in his. This red line is option 2, Commissioner McNulty's map, and there's a red 2. So you can see 2 is this, the southern part of Cochise County, Santa Cruz, and some other parts of Pima County. And I can turn them off individually if that helps, or shade them or something.
You can't just put one map and then the other map?
Sure. This is option 1, Commissioner Freeman. That's the base. So I can also turn this on and put it the other way.
Mr. Herrera?
Could we have one of the commissioners just talk about if it's option 1 we're looking at first, if Commissioner Freeman can talk about how he came up with this decision and just talk a little bit about that particular area. And then we can have Commissioner McNulty talk about that same area and her map, if that makes sense.
I think it does. Would you guys be open to that?
Sure. The district that I put together, which was District 1 and option 1, includes all of Cochise County, keeping that county whole. That is a constitutional criteria, respect for county lines. It keeps all of Santa Cruz County whole. Again, constitutional criteria, respect for county lines. It also respects public comment that the commission took, which I recall hearing public comment and reading public comment about the ties between Santa Cruz County and Cochise County, and they are both relatively rural counties and have some commonality. Putting those two counties together does not make a whole legislative district, however. So a logical place to obtain more population, in my view, was to travel up the transportation corridor, I-19, and include those communities that run along I-19 up to I thought it went up to the Tohono Nation, but it's a little bit short of that, and that gave me the necessary population. That little spur that goes up I-19, to the west of it, it's relatively lightly populated or unpopulated areas, I believe, and so I was able to take some territory over there to make that spur have a little element of compactness to it. Overall, the district is fairly compact, except for that part that extends up the I-19 corridor. And I think, in addition to the compactness criteria, I think there's also, I think those communities along the I-19, share a common community of interest. They're related to each other. They fit together, which was another rationale for supporting grabbing population there.
I was looking at just the compactness measures because we have both that and competitiveness on the two different versions. Okay, go ahead, Ms. McNulty, if you want to talk about your one.
Yeah. The way one is constructed here, it includes most of Cochise County and the Rincon Valley, Vail, Corona de Tucson, the very far southeast part of Tucson, which is increasingly connected to the Benson area and the Sierra Vista area. It includes southern portions of Graham County, which have historic and economic ties with Cochise County. Those valleys run north-south. There's a lot of shared ranching activity, agricultural activity, kind of extension, county extension sort of activity. That ties those areas together. The border communities of Bisbee and Douglas are with District 2. And the reason that I did that was for, really for majority-minority purposes. So the big differences between the option 1 approach and the option 2 approach with regard to Cochise County is that it includes what I think are some closely related communities in the non-reservation portions of Graham County. It includes the far eastern, very far eastern parts of the Tucson metro area that are increasingly tied to some of the communities in Cochise County, the growing areas of Benson, St. David, and Sierra Vista. And we heard a lot of public comment about that recently. And it also excludes, and I think from my perspective this might be the most important part, the Hispanic community in Santa Cruz County and Nogales. That's a border town. It has a much larger Hispanic, Mexican sister city right across the border with it. And if Santa Cruz County is joined with Cochise County in one district, the HVAP of that district is 34.78%. So the effect of doing that, I think, is the result of that is that the Hispanic community in Nogales and those southern areas of the Santa Cruz Valley will not be able to elect the candidate of their choice. So I handled it a little differently. The District 2 on the option 2 map keeps Santa Cruz County whole, and then follows the Santa Cruz County River, the Santa Cruz River, north into South Tucson. And that does a couple things. It is similar to the way the district was drawn 20 years ago. It creates a majority-minority district that is grounded in Tucson and a kind of economic corridor that runs south of there that shares, there's a lot of art tourism, a lot of artistic kinds of endeavors there, a lot of environmental issues and shared common concerns. As I said, the minority-majority component of it. Couple other points. Green Valley, which is fairly different from Sahuarita. Well, it's similar but different. The composition of Green Valley from a voting perspective is different. Sahuarita is a much more mixed community. It's much more Hispanic. Green Valley is really, it should be up with Saddlebrook if it could be, but it can't. It's where it is. In part because Ms. O'Grady, when she first looked at, when I first, kind of showed her the outline of this, was concerned about whether it would work as a voting rights district. I've put Green Valley with some of the more similar communities in Cochise County to kind of bulk up the majority-minority, the strength of this as a majority-minority district. And the last thing I'll say is that the Bisbee-Douglas, the really awful-looking thing along the border, the idea there, even though it looks very terrible, is that those communities do have a fair bit in common. And I thought it might, if we did take this approach, it might be worth getting public comment from folks about, what they thought about that, whether they would like to be in the district with Nogales or whether they would prefer to be in the district with Cochise County.
Yeah, that Cochise area is interesting because on our congressional district map, we had public comment of people coming in and saying they liked the River District version of the congressional district map better than the Everything Bagel version 1 because in that one, Cochise was whole. And then we ultimately ended up, in order to deal with the voting rights issue in CD District 2, we had to go into Cochise County to get population there, so it ended up splitting Cochise. So it's a conundrum, and it's I'm sure going there and going down to Sierra Vista for a hearing will get a lot better sense of what to do. And I guess in the two versions, the only thing for sure is Santa Cruz is whole in both of your versions. So I guess we agree on that. But in order to figure out which way to go, whether we break up Cochise or keep it whole.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Freeman?
I think obviously a part of the analysis is how many benchmark districts do we need in southern Arizona, and that's what this one's trying to achieve. And I understand that. There are some concerns I have about the look of the district, whether we've gone too far, that I think in creating these benchmark districts, at least it's my understanding, and I know council will disabuse me of this understanding if I'm incorrect, but we can't take a blind eye to the other constitutional criteria in trying to put these together. And then the other factor is, on my version, I did not split Graham County. This one does, and I understand the rationale for it, to grab more population. And I just wanted to mention that I wanted to try to keep Graham, Greenlee, and Gila County together. We heard a lot about those, the 3 Gs, Eastern Arizona counties and how they work together. And so in option 1, those 3 counties are kept whole and together.
Yeah, I might just add, I think the HVAP in this district too, as it's configured, would be 61.41%. So, I'd have to kind of redo it and look at the numbers, but I don't think having Douglas and Bisbee in that district are necessarily essential to making it an effective majority-minority district. So, you know, if the consensus was that we'd rather have a clean line than give the folks in Bisbee and Douglas the opportunity to comment on it, looking as it does, there may be a way to do that.
And then in terms of creating sort of a merged map, so to speak, should we just start with a new version, a new template that puts our ideas together into one, or what's the best way to do that?
I would think that it makes sense for the first, to merge the maps, it would make sense to start drawing these voting rights districts first and then kind of work around there. So if we can come to agreement on these 9 districts or eight districts that are benchmarked and then kind of grow it from there. But I'll also leave it to Mary to suggest. One thing I think it would, at least preliminary analysis has indicated that at least part of Santa Cruz probably needs to go into a voting rights district because there is a sizable Hispanic population there. So that's maybe one parameter to kind of look at. And then I don't know if Mary or Joe have others that we've been trying to really break down these numbers the last couple days, so they might have something to offer also. But I need to plug in my computer, so excuse me.
We're open to any suggestions, you guys.
Madam Chair, the only thing I want to offer at this time is just to follow up on something that Commissioner Freeman mentioned about we do have to create these ability to elect districts, but I agree with Commissioner Freeman that we mustn't disregard the other constitutional criteria, and obviously we have to create the districts so as to obtain voting rights pre-clearance, but we don't also want to inadvertently create a gerrymandered district that exposes the commission to a Section 2 violation under the Voting Rights Act. So I would urge the commissioners to keep that in mind. I'm not suggesting that the district as presented would do that, but there is something to be said about the look of these districts, and then if there's a way to create these majority-minority districts without, and also respect the other criteria, then I would urge the commission to consider that so that we don't inadvertently expose the commission to a Section 2 violation.
Well, so given that, it would seem that for Southern Arizona, Mr. Freeman's 1 is probably better, although maybe some of Santa Cruz has to come out, I don't know. But that Ms. McNulty's Yuma, the way Yuma's dealt with, may be better from the Voting Rights Act. It's not?
Well, Madam Chair, as we start up in our opening comments, we all agreed that you should have 3 majority-minority, attempt to do 3 majority-minority districts in Southern Arizona. And so that would be one concern. The District 1, if you do Cochise County as it is in, so along those lines, the District 2 from Commissioner McNulty's, the problem with that district is, whether the Cochise County arm is too ugly, I guess, if it could be more compact. It certainly has community of interest issues because you're linking border towns. So I think it's defensible, but I do think it can be. This just is working at census tracts as a first cut. It could either be smoothed off or cut off, and it's at 61% now. If we went with the Commissioner Freeman approach, the challenge would be creating that. How do you create that 3rd minority district in Southern Arizona? So that's the challenge if you go with the.
Yeah, but can't on the Freeman map the Yuma split be incorporated the way it is on the McNulty map to get that 3rd district in some way, or no?
That's already one of them. So they both have a Yuma district.
That is one, okay.
That's one of the majority minority districts.
So even though
They both have a
Yuma's-
Tucson district. And then the third one, we think probably has to come from Santa Cruz and some other Hispanic area, whether it goes east into Cochise and grabs some of the border towns, or farther up into Pima to get some of the Hispanic population in Tucson. But it seems, and again, we haven't explored every possibility, and we haven't been drawing maps. We've just been kind of analyzing population tables for this, and looking at the different drafts that we've already gone through in the last map, that those are probably the three places that are going to be majority minority districts. And so both of them share the Yuma district and a Tucson district. That's probably, and then I guess Commissioner McNulty is able to get the third one with how she treats Santa Cruz here. So that would, in her map, that's the third down here. So.
Yeah, and it is at 61%, so it could probably be lower just based on what the opportunity to elect numbers have been in the past in southern Arizona.
Mr. Desmond, could you look at what happens if we remove Bisbee and Douglas to the, and we need to make up the population, but
sure.
Think about how to do that.
I'm going to create a new plan then, so as to leave this one just where it is. It'll be 1 second while I get this ready.
Mr. Canfield, I don't, just to be clear, I don't think you were saying that a compactness problem necessarily causes a Section 2 lawsuit, were you? I mean, I think this is just a, you know, it was a draft and it's a rough-looking line, but in every other respect, it meets the constitutional criteria.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McNulty, yes, I wasn't suggesting that the map violated any of the provisions. So. And I should clarify, Ms. O'Grady pointed out that the Chavy-Reno issue I raised with the look of the map was an actually an equal protection violation, not necessarily Section 2, but it's still a claim, viable claim that the Commission has to consider. It's an actionable claim against the map if the district is drawn in such a way that it would present a claim under Chavy-Reno. So.
So if you were to remove all of Cochise County from District 2, the current number is 61.41. After making that change, the HVAP number drops to 60.8, although the district is 30,000 people underpopulated, so when you go to add more people, you're probably going to get more Anglo, and that'll probably drop a little bit further.
So we'd have to work on that, but it looks like it'll work either way in terms of being a performing Voting Rights Act district.
If it's a priority to not split that part of Cochise County, there's probably ways of working it, but we have to look into that more, and that's something we can do. However you guys want to do. We can, I don't know if you want to start working, it would be good to start, I guess, theorizing about how we are going to work on a merged map. Maybe it's something where we go back to the original grid map, overlay the two layers and kind of work district by district, starting with the voting rights districts, something like that.
You know, I just don't see that working here. I really don't, because every single thing that you change changes everything else. I think, you know, we have to make some decisions about what we want to accomplish, and I don't think we can do that by putting lines on top of other lines and trying to split the baby. I just think we need to, you know, decide what is in the best interest of the state, and try and put that together based that way. I just don't think we can do it by taking two completely conceptually different districts and put them on top of one another and trying to divide them in half.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
No, I completely understand trying to keep counties whole and not creating areas that look a little odd like number 2 does, the District 2 in the option to version 8A from Commissioner McNulty. But I think she explained it well, the reason why she did that. And I think communities of interest and the Voting Rights Act, which is I think one of the first things we need to meet, is a great rationale for creating a majority-minority district that looks like number 2. So I would be in favor of keeping it the way it is and allowing the people in that area an opportunity to comment once we put a draft map out there on the legislative side to see what they think about this particular area. Again, the Voting Rights Act is crucial, and I think creating that particular district the way it does, the way it is, Commissioner McNulty laid it out pretty well why she did what she did.
The other thing one of the things I'm concerned about is, you know, the whole southern Arizona area. One of the big differences between Mr. Freeman's map and the way I did this map is that there are only 4 districts in Tucson that are really centered in Tucson on Mr. Freeman's map. And it moves the center of gravity of a couple of the districts to Maricopa County. And I don't think that's a good thing for southern Arizona. So I guess to the extent that everything ties into everything else, I think there is a way to make up the population for this district in Tucson, but once we start doing that, you know, then we start moving the central Tucson district up into the other central Tucson district, and then we start either, you know, jeopardizing the second majority-minority district, or then we have to start moving 9 up into 11. And I'm sure there are ways to work that all out, but it also may make some sense before we embark on that, you know, to think about whether this could be made to look better and whether, you know, people should be given an opportunity to comment on it.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, Mr. Desmond, bring back the original way that Commissioner McNulty had that District 2. I think it follows a natural boundary, which is the Santa Cruz River. Is that correct? Is that the...
Not over here. This is really just, those are census tracts around trying to take in Bisbee and Douglas, and I know it's not very well done. I've just kind of there's a rough cut at it. I'm sure there's a way to do it more neatly.
Sure.
Well, I'm not sure, but there might be.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
I know there's a big mountain there separating sort of Santa Cruz County from Sierra Vista in those parts. And then as to the Commissioner McNulty's comments about how I laid out Tucson, I did it. I don't think the Constitution empowers us to make policy decisions as to where the center of gravity of political power is going to be in the state. It doesn't speak to that. I did not consider that when I was laying out my districts. I simply tried to apply the 6 constitutional criteria and fit the districts together the way I thought were sensible for Tucson. I'm sorry that Commissioner Sturts isn't here with us today. I know this hasn't been mentioned yet today. He's from Tucson, and I would value his input as well. And I know that he had a family emergency involving his mother, who is hospitalized, and I know he wishes he could be here with us today, but he's unable to.
I was just thinking along those lines. We have 2 commissioners from Maricopa County, and I know you're both natives. We have 2 from southern Arizona, and I'm wondering if one way to tackle this might be to have you 2 work together in the Maricopa County area and figure out what points you agree on, and same for Commissioner McNulty and Commissioner Sturts, and they can talk about the areas that they think about for southern Arizona, and maybe we figure out where the common ground is there. We're waiting on the northeast corner to hear some more input from some communities of interest up there. What do you all think of that idea? Then we have a Republican and a Democrat each working on 2 different parts.
I think we need to work on the map as a whole, and you know, I'd like to think we're going to have common ground on some of these things, but we've come at them pretty differently in these two different maps. I don't think we're going to get there on many of the issues.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
I agree with Commissioner McNulty. With the Voting Rights Act and the majority minority districts, with that, I'm not willing to compromise. We need to meet the requirements in order to pass preclearance. And there's not a lot of compromise on that. I mean, we don't have a lot of choices. I really do see that there is a difference, but I think we need to approach this with the intent of passing preclearance on the first try. And I don't see a lot of compromise on this. There has to be one way, and that's meeting the Voting Requirements Act.
Madam Chair, and to the extent you were trying to create subcommittees, those subcommittees would be subject to the open meeting law and all the notice requirements.
Sure.
That's
No, I meant that, but. Well, can we work on the majority-minority districts then? I don't know where else to go from here.
Well, maybe we could, I'd be happy to talk about the other two majority-minority districts in southern Arizona. So one of them is 2, and then the other, the second one is 3. And this includes downtown Tucson, the University of Arizona, and then these neighborhoods in southwest Tucson, Drexel Heights, Valencia West, and Tucson Estates, and the Pasquayaqui Reservation. I think the east boundary is Campbell. And the HVAP improves from the current LD 27 from 49.9% to about 51.16%. I think it would be a performing majority-minority district, and I think it makes sense in terms of the communities that it includes.
And then Commissioner Freeman had a parallel, maybe not parallel, but he also had an urban Tucson majority-minority district. And in his map, it was District 2. I don't know if it makes sense to see the different areas that they take in.
So this is District 2 from Commissioner Freeman's map, which doesn't have much overlap with Commissioner McNulty's District 3, but does have a fair amount of overlap with her District 2.
Could you put HVAP on, please?
Sure. So the darker green areas are obviously higher Hispanic voting age population percentage. Let me just confirm that, but yes.
One thing that concerns me about this configuration is that we have 2 completely different kinds of areas within this district. We have Hispanic, we're kind of dividing a Hispanic community on the west side, and then we've got the base, and then we've got much less Hispanic areas on the east side that probably have higher turnout than these very different Hispanic areas in South Tucson. I think we're also splitting downtown.
I think, at least initially, it does look like this would be the Democratic number here is pretty strong. It seems like some of the Anglo areas are probably fairly Democratic in this one. I think when we're talking with Bruce, that's something that we're going to need to maybe consider a little bit, is if they live with like-minded individuals. Is that correct, Mary and Joe?
Well, I think the question is whether they can elect a candidate of their choice, and I think right now that area is represented by Daniel Patterson and Matt Hines. The senator is Linda Lopez.
And we're not getting into specific incumbents, but in terms of...
I'm not talking about where they live. I'm talking about the fact that the two state legislators are not Hispanic. So the question is, you know, is DOJ going to be concerned with the high Hispanic but low turnout on one side of the district and the very low Hispanic but higher turnout on the other side of the district and the base in the middle? Is this really an opportunity to elect a candidate of choice? So that was my concern when I looked at that district. Plus the fact that it looks like it splits downtown Tucson. So then the other southern Arizona majority-minority district, I think, would be 4. What's that?
You're 4, Commissioner Freeman's 3, yes.
Okay.
Well, they both share this line.
Mr. Herrera?
When will we be able to do the racially polarized voting analysis? Is that?
I believe it's happening kind of on an ongoing basis, but it's something you do once you have a map, almost. If legal counsel wants to expand on that, I believe some of it is going on to give us, you know, the numbers we think we're going to need to meet. But it's kind of something you do once the map has been completed almost.
The reason Madam Chair, the reason I ask is I'd love to see that particular analysis on option 1, the way that Commissioner Freeman drew out the District 3. As I said, that is a concern of mine, and that's why I agree with the split between North and South Yuma. Because for my interest, I want to clear, I want to get approved and pre-clearance, and that's why I'm urging that we do the split.
Mr. Desmond, can you do the cruise analysis on North Yuma versus South Yuma County?
The what analysis?
The state mine inspector analysis. Just take everything north of Yuma, in North Yuma County. Or looked at it another way, everything that is in...
I could shade the map by mine inspector results. Would that help? You could.
It would be easier if you could just run that.
Okay. All right, so I guess the best way to probably do that would be so using the split from the Hispanic.
Using that split, yes.
All right, so what I would probably do then is make 2 new districts and then just give you the percentage for each. That's what I'll do to try to do that.
I have a question for legal counsel, put you guys on the spot. From a voting rights analysis perspective, was one version of the map of the two versions we have in front of us better in terms of meeting those requirements than the other, or are they the same?
Well, as to Southern Arizona, again, our recommendation is that they have 3 majority Hispanic VAP, and the McNulty version has that. The current version of the Freeman option does not have that. So I would say right now, the McNulty structure is preferred from a voting rights standpoint.
For
I don't feel the
Southern
same way on
Arizona.
Maricopa County, but in terms of Southern Arizona, I would say the McNulty approach gets us to the 3 that we were looking at.
So, looking at this, the northern part of Yuma County had a vote of 26.96% Democratic in that mine inspector's race.
Can you do the same thing in Southern? 26 point.
0.96.
And do we have the HVAP in that northern?
I just undid it. Let me. 26.96 and HVAP of 25.48. Okay. 0.48. Okay, the southern part has an HVAP of 67.61. And in the mine inspector's race, the Democrat received 54.34% of the vote.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Would it be possible, Willie, Mr. Desmond, if we could, for that particular race, so the way District 14 is laid out, what would the average be of that particular race statewide? Meaning, does District 4 have less than the, so if in the end that the percentage was the Republican ended up getting 60% of the vote, and the Democrat, 39, 40% of the vote, is this particular District 14 below the average? Does that make sense? Because if he lost, I guess what I'm saying is if he would have lost worse in that particular district, the way it's set out, than the average, then that, to me, again, that's a concern. If you're able to do that.
I guess I'm a little confused as to what you're asking.
You know what? Never mind. I don't even know what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think he did. 26.94.
So,
I have a question. How many people live in that northern part that you just carved out?
so in the southern part, it's 132,900 or 493. In the northern part, it's 63,258. So it's about 2/3 in the southern part, 1/3 in the northern part.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
but I think that the way that northern part of Yuma votes is probably a stronger voting population, meaning they go to the polls more often and they're a consistent vote. So even though they're lesser in population, they tend to be what we call pretty good voters.
And just in terms of the HVAP comparison, and although these districts include a lot of different pieces of current districts, the current southwestern Arizona district, LD24 has an HVAP of 51.37. That's where Yuma is now. And under these proposals, District 3 in the Freeman option is at 49.97 HVAP, so it's a little lower, although again, they include pieces of different old districts. And in the McNulty option, District 4 is at 53.65. So it's a little higher if you just look at compare it to 24 in terms of southwestern Arizona.
Well, given that we need 3 majority-minority districts in southern Arizona, and the McNulty proposal has that, Mr. Freeman, is there another way you see of getting a third one into your map that we should try, or do you like any aspects of what Ms. McNulty has done that we could incorporate and all agree to utilize?
There might be, but I don't think I'm going to be able to sit here right now on the fly and draw you a new district. And if the goal is to vote on the LDs by Friday, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
And I understand Commissioner Freeman's response, but let me remind everyone that this is going to be a draft map, and we do have to come up with a draft map before we start the second round of hearings. So what I'd like to do is move as quickly as possible. As I said, there's really not much compromising on these voting rights districts. We need to respect that constitutional requirement, and I think our attorneys are pretty clear that we need to have 3 on the southern part of Arizona, and I think Commissioner McNulty's map did that. So I think we should move forward and adopt them as part of the draft, and then let's move forward with the ones in Maricopa County.
Well, maybe what we can do is create a new map that we're starting to build together. And for now, we'll include the version that Ms. McNulty has, because it does have the 3 majority-minority districts in southern Arizona that we need. And then if Mr. Freeman has, that's some homework that I guess he has, where if he wants to draw a third one into his, and we can then look at how those break out later. But I think for now, since this one has the 3, that we need to move forward and try it out.
And again, for clarification, it's a statewide goal, but we considered the 3 in southern Arizona, again, looking at the options in terms of how to get to that statewide goal, and if people can have 2 and get there another way, but we just weren't seeing it when we were looking at the options. It looked like we would need to have 3 in southern Arizona.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
And just for the record, I have a different interpretation of what a draft map means. And I'm not going to belabor the point. I expressed my opinion on Monday, and if anyone's curious, they can look at that transcript.
Okay. So would that work for people to build a new map that we'll try out as, something that we've all worked on together to try to achieve? And it doesn't mean anyone has agreed to this being final or anything. It's strictly trying to figure out a way to move forward. And we have one version that has 3 majority-minority districts in southern Arizona and one that doesn't. And since we need 3, we, for now, just to try it out, I think it's worth pursuing what Ms. McNulty has in the bottom in southern Arizona, which on her map,
3 and 4.
the numbers.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, oh, yours are 1, 2, 3, okay. Well, and 4, it's
No.
4.
1,
It's
2, 4. 1, 2, 4. Sorry.
3, 4.
2, 3, 4.
Oh, that's right. 2, 3, 4. It's not. One is Cochise County.
Oh, okay, up in Pima. So those are the 3 majority-minority districts in southern Arizona that we'll try out.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I like your idea of creating a clean map with incorporating those 3, 2, 3, and 4 on the option 2 in that clean map, and starting with those 3. And then let's start working, then we work to the Maricopa County area and see where we can come up with agreement on those, on the majority-minority districts there. And I'm assuming we'll have to wait until we hear back from the Native American tribes in the city of Flagstaff on the eastern rural majority-minority district.
And Madam Chair, in terms of things to look at, in terms of improving that map, I think we talked about maybe dealing with the arm in Cochise County.
Right.
The 61% may be higher than is necessary in southern Arizona in terms of an opportunity to elect district. And so those were some of the things we were looking at. Just on voting rights criteria, there are certainly other things on other criteria.
I'm curious, well, it may be too hard to figure this out right now, but on McNulty's number 2, what happens to HVAP when you remove that arm and just leave, I know you have to get population from somewhere, but taking out those border communities in Cochise?
I think it just went down a point. Was that right? 60, went down to 60.8.
It went down a point, and then there's always the potential that when you balance population, it'll drop another amount, maybe another point or 2.
So we had, what, about 30,000 people that we need to make up somewhere else in a way that doesn't reduce the HVAP below.
That I guess where it doesn't, where the HVAP needs to be is something we're going to have to look at further. I believe that the current benchmarks down there are at around 49.8%. So 60% is probably too high. So we're probably safe bringing it down a little bit more. But again, I think it's going to be helpful going forward. For the congressional, we've been looking at HVAP solely. But with these, we're going to need to also look at ability to elect. So we are going to have to look at some other numbers in concert with the HVAP also. So there's places where the HVAP might be, 55, 60%, and there's the ability to elect is less than districts with 48%, just depending on I guess the citizenship numbers and also the just the turnout patterns of those areas. So there's more moving pieces going forward using in these ledge maps. It's getting even more complicated, I guess.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
That's what concerns me about the messing with the current look of District 2. You start taking out those areas that are part of Cochise, and you're going to have to start grabbing, what, 30,000 people somewhere else. And again, that may lower the HVAP, that may or may not, but it may lower the voting strength of that particular majority-minority district. So I'm a little let's be cautious when we start doing that.
And the other option is smoothing that area out again.
Okay, should we look at the majority-minority districts in Maricopa County? And both maps, can we talk about that again, the 2 versions that we have? How many are each created in Maricopa County?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Just for clarification, is Mr. Desmond currently creating a map that uses the 3 majority minority districts in option 2 in the southern Arizona border?
Yes, that's my take. Does that work, Mr. Desmond, or no? He's wiping his forehead, which,
I'm just trying to think, like, how it's going to work. So you have a couple of options. It's easy for me to put those into a new map, those districts. The question then becomes is, the districts that fill in around there, what do I use? You have options of using lines that are from one of the two maps or using the grid lines. And then the second question then becomes, are those lines then adjusted by me to meet equal population, or are they left out of balance? And that's something we do as a group in session. I would prefer to leave them out of balance so that can be something that you guys all work through.
right.
Maybe we do go back to the grid lines, except give me the discretion to adjust those to not split tribal lands or something along those lines.
I'm wondering, can you populate a new map with just the 9 majority-minority districts based upon what we're telling you now? So there'd be islands essentially in the map, and you're not building the whole map around it yet. You're just putting in the majority-minority districts as we're discussing them now. Is that possible, or?
I guess my recommendation would be to, at least as a first cut, do what Mr. Desmond recommended in terms of the adjusting the grid map for the voting rights districts, and then leaving the remainder of the grid, the original grid, going back to the original grid map for the remainder, and then the commission as a whole taking it from there. Okay. And we can discuss that more, but that would be my recommendation.
But Ms. O'Grady, he wouldn't have to go to the trouble of adjusting population in the other grids. He would just build them in from the grid. Okay.
Everybody good with that?
I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but carry on.
So
Can you repeat
I
it?
guess just to make sure that I get it then. So it's clear. What we'll do is, when we're talking, just with the purposes of Southern Arizona, I will take the 3 majority-minority districts from Commissioner McNulty's map, overlay those onto, I guess, the initial grid map. I won't adjust the result. You know, the districts that are cut off there, I won't change their population. So there will be some that are probably dramatically underpopulated, and there will probably be some unassigned areas also. And then as a group, we can adjust those later. And I think we're going to go through the same process in Maricopa, either taking districts wholly, all the districts out of one of the 2 maps, or maybe a combination of the two maps. If we'd like some districts in Maricopa from one map and some districts from another map, putting those in there too. So at least then we have, I guess the way we've talked about it and the way we think it may make sense to proceed is if you have the majority-minority districts figured out, any changes to the map would have to not affect the complexion of those districts, so that you can change those lines going forward, but you would need to keep the HFAP and ability to elect numbers where they are. So that's kind of the next, that's how we merge the maps and go to a single point going forward. Is that clear?
Madam Chair?
Is that correct?
That's how I'm
Mr.
understanding it.
Is it good for you, Mr. Freeman?
Yeah, it's fine.
And Madam Chair, just to clarify, we're not creating a draft map. We're creating essentially a third map.
Right.
So we have still Freeman's, McNulty's, and then this third map that has no name.
Right. It's the merged map, so to speak. And
Is there a food
see.
you want to pick to name it after? Or
No.
a breakfast treat or anything?
Depends what it looks like.
Madam Chair, just for the record, that's how I worked on this map. You remember we sat here in session using the grid, and that's how I made these districts. I moved the lines from the grid. So I don't have a problem with doing it again, but that is what I did to create the districts in the first place.
Well, and I assume that Mr. Freeman did the same thing and worked from a grid map initially. So I'm curious, if they generated 2 versions from the grid map. Does that mean the 3rd version is from the grid map or not?
We'd like to make, well, those districts are from the grid map, and we'd like to make sure, I guess, that the other lines are all from the grid map too, so that when we adjust, we're adjusting the grid.
Okay.
Should we go to Maricopa then, if that's all clear?
Yeah. Yeah, everyone's clear.
Okay.
Mr. Herrera? Sorry.
Will you be able to add those 3 districts on the southern part of Arizona now, or do you need time to do that?
I could do it now. I would kind of say we maybe should figure out the next part of Maricopa, and we can do it all at once. And I can either do that then right now as we're going forward, or do it tonight. We can see where we stand once we look at the next set, kind of.
I want to check on our court reporter. How are you doing? Tired. It's 5:51, so should we take a short break? Okay, how about a 10-minute break, and we'll come back into session shortly. Okay, we'll enter back into public session. Recess is over. The time is 6:19 p.m. And we are in the midst of discussing agenda item 2, making adjustments to the legislative grid map, going over the 2 different versions we have in front of us. And we had just talked about Southern Arizona. And we're working on the majority-minority districts that need to be incorporated into the map, and looking at what the 2 versions we have in front of us have in that regard. And it looks like both the maps, we're moving to Maricopa County now, both have 4 majority and minority districts, which I think is the number.
No.
They don't. Okay.
They don't.
Tell us what they have.
Commissioner Freeman's has 4, Commissioner McNulty's has 3.
Okay.
So
it's the opposite of what happened in Southern
that's
Arizona.
right. They had the same total, but they had them in different places.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
What I'd like to know, which of the 2 versions it comes closest to the Arizona Hispanic Coalition or map?
I can, you mean the Minority Coalition?
I'm sorry, the Minority Coalition.
Yeah, I think I can show you. All right, so this is going to be a little difficult. I'm going to zoom in, so just bear with me for 1 second.
Why?
Thank you.
All right, I guess the only way this is really going to work is if we just look at them one at a time. So I will just start with the black line. Here is Commissioner McNulty's district. The green line is the Minority Coalition, so it's the same line. And then Commissioner Freeman has, I think, largely the same line with just a few little areas that are slightly different down here. So for District 27, there's nearly universal agreement between the 3.
Yay.
Just these little areas.
That's great.
Okay. 27, I think, was the easiest one. So It looks like, for the purposes of this, that Commissioner McNulty followed the minority coalition exactly. So, and Commissioner Freeman in District 18. I'm just going to make this a little. So District 19, I'm sorry, for both of them. There's some slight difference down here. Up here in Avondale, Maricopa, and going over right here. And I don't want to speak totally for Commissioner Freeman, but I believe he had me try to build the minority coalition district lines at an earlier time before they were submitted. I think they changed a little bit, and I didn't have the actual file at that point, so.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's as I recall too, and I think if the lines differ at this point, I did, over the weekend, I was doing lots of iterations on population balancing, and every time you move a district to refine the population imbalance, you end up changing all the other districts, so it's an iterative process. So perhaps some of where those lines end, where I ended with those lines might be a product of, I think are a product of population balancing. But there was, I saw an opportunity to create 4 minority-majority districts in the Phoenix area, so the next district is going to differ from the Hispanic Coalition submission.
So yeah, so then District 20 is, I guess, different than Commissioner. So 29 is right here, and that's slightly different than District 20, in that it takes this area out of Phoenix and it goes up farther into Glendale here. So that's the divergence there. And then what, Mary, what's the? All right, so I'll remove layers to make it clear. So the black line is option 2. The thick red line is option 1, and this green line is the minority coalition. So option 1 kind of gets washed out here because it's behind the green line by and large. You can make that a little thicker, but it's just kind of hard to see all these at once. So,
Mr. Herrera?
Mr. Desmond, how many, currently, in the current maps, how many majority Latino districts are there in Maricopa County?
Mary and Joe, I think you guys have those numbers.
Commissioner Herrera, currently District 13, 14, and 16. So currently there are 3 majority Latino districts in Maricopa County.
Thank you.
And then there's one other that's a majority combined minority with a plurality, District 15.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Ms. O'Grady, after one of the things I looked at was adjusting 29 with the other minority districts. And I think there's a way to move the boundary south on the north boundary south and the south boundary south without compromising the other 3 minority districts, but in a way that increases the HVAP in 29 so that it also would be a 4th majority minority district. And
And 29 is sort of kind of old 14, more or less, and some other at 50, and it's at 64% in your plan, right? Or,
I have to look at the...
oh, I'm sorry, 32% for 29.
And with those changes, I think it would bring it to over 50%.
I think that's very possible. And looking at Commissioner Freeman's, I think that's kind of what's happening here a little bit.
Maybe if you could look at that tonight, I'd appreciate it. If you move the north boundary south to about Dunlap and move the south boundary to Van Buren between 43rd Avenue and 19th Avenue.
So the north boundary south to Dunlap, and the south boundary.
South to Van Buren, between 19th and 43rd, it looked like.
Between which, I'm sorry?
19th Avenue and 43rd Avenue.
Okay. That's something that I can look at, although we might want to do that as a group so that tomorrow we have, instead of me showing you what would happen, you guys can all have what happened tonight.
Yeah, and that'd be fine, because I kind of had some ideas about how to make the adjustments in the other districts that might work too, but I didn't get a chance to finish them.
All right.
So we could work through that tomorrow.
Okay.
How many majority districts did the Hispanic Coalition submit? Or what's the
They
correct?
submitted 3.
Let's show those green lines again.
And those, again, we can give you the percentages there of the HVAP. So District 16 here is 54, and that's this. Let me label their districts. So we have the sheet they supplied. District 16 is the new 27, and that is 54.79% HVAP, but also it's 15% non-Hispanic African American. So the non-Hispanic white percentage is it's lower. Yeah, and that's the same thing here. And then District 13, which is R19 in their map, is 67.1% Hispanic population and 6.7% non-Hispanic black, so about 73% of those two. And then District 14, the top one, is 64.5% non-Hispanic, or Hispanic, and about 6% non-Hispanic African American. So I'll just give you the Hispanic number, and then I'll give you the African American.
Just for the last district.
The last district is 64.4%, 64.47% Hispanic, and 5.91% African American. That's voting age.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
Now, is Mr. Desmond giving us the HVAP for the coalition maps, what they're requesting, or is that the benchmark?
That's what they're requesting.
Can you, just for the record, can you tell me which of the two versions come closest to meeting those requirements?
Well, the Commissioner McNulty's map is those districts exactly. And then the benchmark in those districts, Mary had looked at both what it was currently and what it was when it was pre-cleared. Do you have those numbers? Or
If you'd like those numbers, for 13, currently it's 68.27 HVAP, but it's become much more Hispanic. When it was pre-cleared, it was 55%. And 14 now is 64.9, and when it was pre-cleared, it was 58. 16 has grown more than the other districts. It's a little less Hispanic, but still it has but it has a significant other minority population. It's currently 56.7, and it was at the time of pre-clearance 59.
so these numbers are fairly close to the current benchmark. But
they're close to the benchmark, higher than what they were pre-cleared at.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
Mr. Grady, you're talking about option 2, correct?
I'm just talking about the benchmark, right?
You're right. Thank you.
Do we want to look at Commissioner Freeman's fourth
Yeah,
majority minority
that'd be good.
district? Which is option number, I think it's
I believe it's 28.
Yeah, I think so. So that is this district right here. So District 28. And so again, the red dotted line is Commissioner Freeman's line, and then the black heavier line is Commissioner McNulty's.
And Commissioner McNulty, did you create a fourth in Maricopa or no?
Madam Chair?
I just want to ask her that
I'm
question.
sorry.
Yes, I just haven't finished it. I'll have to finish it tonight, but in 29, moving the boundaries a little bit south in both ways, I think that works. That becomes would become an effective majority-minority district.
Mr. Herrera?
Madam Chair, yeah, could I see the fourth majority-minority district that Mr. Freeman created without that overlay? I'm having a difficult time.
This one.
Okay. Can you can you just tell me what the areas are? Can you go into some detail?
Sure. So that's the census block groups, again, shaded by Hispanic population, just as a reference point. Going into, I guess, the streets.
Please.
So it runs, it follows District 27, and it goes right along Highway, looks like 60, 89, and 10 there. Is that Van Buren? I think it's Highway 60 right there. Is that Van Buren? Yeah.
Van Buren.
And then it goes, that's pretty much its southern border, east to west. It goes north here when it comes up against District 19 over at, that's 35th Avenue. It runs north on 35th Avenue until it hits Thomas Road, and it goes west until it hits 43rd Avenue, follows 43rd Avenue north until it hits Camelback, follows Camelback east until it hits 35th Avenue again, follows 35th Avenue north until it hits Northern Avenue, follows that again east until it hits 19th Avenue, follows that south down to
I think it's a canal.
I think so too. I'm just
The Grand Canal.
Yeah, it's Grand Canal Road. Follows Grand Canal over until it hits 51. It goes south on 51 until it hits Thomas Road again. Follows Thomas Road to 48th. I think that's 48th Street, yeah. South just a little bit to Oak Street. And then Oak Street over, and it kind of runs along the border of Scottsdale and Tempe then. Again, until it hits 60, which is the road that Van Buren.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
What concerns me about this particular district is that I think it incorporates some historic areas, if I'm correct. And if that's the case, if you're combining highly Hispanic areas with historic areas and trying to combine that into majority-minority district, you'll run into the problem where you have an area within that district that votes often, and that'll be the historic area. And you'll have the majority-minority area that isn't as reliable, they don't vote as often, so you may have a situation where the minority group in that area isn't able to elect a candidate of their choice. So I think you may run into that problem with that district.
I think looking at this district and looking at, I don't have the data table loaded up here. If we switch to Commissioner Freeman's being the base, I think it does have a fairly strong Democratic number in District 28, and that is based off of election results.
Correct.
So in District 28, the Republican in Index 2 is 34%. So it is a strong Democratic district, which probably means that it would have a ability to elect there.
I don't think that's the issue, though.
Oh.
I think the issue is in the primary.
Yeah.
The issue is whether I don't know this area, maybe, but I do know if it's anything like my own neighborhood, you know, the very high turnout white historic areas can easily dominate the lower turnout minority areas, and then you have a situation where in the primary they aren't able to elect their candidate. I have a question about where this is in relation to the existing LD 14. It looks a little like the existing LD 14 that DOJ had issues with last time. Maybe it's just the configuration.
Okay, I can put on the existing layer.
And as background there, the existing 14 obviously was pre-cleared, but early on in the pre-clearance process last time, District 14 and 13 were two of the districts that DOJ initially expressed concern about. They had gone from, at that point, District 14 was 50% and 13 was 51%, and they were created by dividing, by splitting the benchmark, old benchmark that had been a 65% minority. And so the commission went back and bumped it up to what was ultimately pre-cleared in 14, which was a level of 58% in 14 and 55% in 13.
Mr. Herrera?
And let me make it clear that that it was great that Commissioner Freeman was able to create a fourth majority-minority district. So I think that's something we should strive to do, if at all possible. But what I don't want to do is dilute that majority-minority district and not give them the ability to elect someone of their choice by combining it with a population that may overwhelm the majority-minority district in terms of voting strength, and not basically preventing the majority-minority district from electing candidate of their choice in the primary and also in the general election.
So
Okay, so 14 is
this district. It follows, goes south here, and then the long, skinny part goes.
okay, and those are the white neighborhoods that were at issue when Justice looked at that.
If I turn on the census block, you can see the racial makeup of this district.
And I'm not sure exactly what the district looked like when DOJ had the concerns. We know what it looked like when it was pre-cleared. We could go back and look at what it looked like when they objected. But there's been lots of changes, obviously, in that area too.
And this shading again is the current population.
So What is 28 now?
So if I turn off, so 28 looks like it's a combination of 14 and 15. If I turn that off, you can see 28 is this area. And if I turn it back on, maybe it'll be helpful if I turn the label off here. So, District 28, Districts 14 and 15. Is that what?
Yeah, no, that's what I was looking for, because that's kind of the issue. All that in the middle of the district is not Hispanic at all, looks like.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Well, is there any way you can bring up the current map, legislative map? And I think that particular, that fourth competitive, or the fourth majority-minority district that Mr. Freeman was able to create is very similar to 14?
Yeah, no, this is the
Yeah.
current map.
Yeah, I think that's what he just showed.
And they're not able to elect, I don't think that, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think they have been able to elect a candidate of their choice. Is that correct? I mean, am I?
They have elected minority candidates from there, not all minority candidates, and we haven't checked to see whether the non-minority candidates were the candidate of choice of the minority community, but they have elected one Hispanic candidate consistently.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Ms. O'Grady, when you say one Hispanic candidate, do you know in the span of how long?
I didn't bring my list of
Sure.
that list with me today, but I think fairly consistently there has been one Hispanic candidate elected from 14.
I guess, well, so it looks like we have agreement on 3 of these, at least. I'd be a little concerned about, I'd like to understand what else is going on in Phoenix and what we're going to be able to accomplish, and see what configuration of the fourth majority-minority district would complement other objectives.
And we want to emphasize too, there's the fourth majority-minority, but we also think there should be a fifth with an opportunity to elect based off of the analysis, whether that's a plurality or a coalition. There needs to be another one on top of that. And maybe a 6th, depending.
There were a couple possibilities in the map that I had prepared. One is the Tempe West Mesa area, and the other is can't remember what the grid number is.
I believe it was 13 in far western Maricopa County. It was an area where in both maps.
Yeah, around El Mirage and Surprise.
13 and 29.
Or 14, last way? Surprise is in 14. 13 is parts of Glendale, at least in, oh no, yours goes up into El Mirage. So I'm going to turn off. So 13 in your map is parts of Avondale.
It's in the West Valley, yeah.
Yeah.
It was 32.47% Hispanic.
at this point, I guess the question is how do we proceed from here? I think
Mr. Herrera?
As I said before, that we really can't compromise on the Voting Rights Act, so what I'd like to do is adopt the minority coalition, those three, excuse me, I wasn't using the microphone, the three majority minority districts in Maricopa County that was proposed by the Hispanic Coalition, and start working on a fourth, possibly fifth majority minority district. And what I'd like to do, create the fourth majority district using population west of 19th Avenue. I think there's a strong Latino population in that area, a nice concentration, and also possibly a fifth using Tempe and East Mesa, as we did in the congressional map. I think we can create a fourth and fifth majority minority district using those two areas of population.
that's fine. It might be the case, though, that we're going to have to take from some of the minority coalition districts in order to get that fourth and fifth, because they are awfully high.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I personally would be okay with that, as long as we try to keep the minority coalition map as close to what they want as possible. And if we can do that, maybe lower the HVAP slightly and on the ones that we need to, but again, not straying too far from the minority coalition map.
Would you all be comfortable doing that? I know your lines matched that, Ms. McNulty, and essentially Mr. Freeman's were very close to those.
Madam Chair, in order to adjust 29 to work as an effective majority-minority district, it would be necessary to take some population from the other three, and I had worked on some ideas about how to do that, but hadn't finished it, but I do think that's possible. So they would also all be self-contained. The changes would be self-contained.
Mr. Freeman?
I think we've demonstrated that 4 can be created in this area of the valley. I mean, it may need some tweaking and fine-tuning to make sure they would pass muster. I think on 19, I'm speaking of option 1, on District 19, the HVAP is, which is essentially the district proposed by the Hispanic Coalition. The HVAP is pretty high at, I think, 66%, and perhaps some population could be borrowed from that and put into District 13 on my map, which could form the basis of a coalition district. That district includes sort of western Maricopa County, includes Buckeye and Goodyear and parts of Avondale.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Again, I would be in favor of the district that Mr. Freeman had created if it did not dilute the Latino voting strength by creating those historic areas. Again, if it didn't do that, then I would be in favor of that particular layout. But again, when you add that white population of the historic areas, it does dilute the voting strength. So, and we need to be aware of that.
Do we know that for a fact, that it's diluting the voting strength in that district?
No.
Okay.
Not sitting here. And I guess when I look at it, it seems that one of our other sort of plurality opportunity to elect, although they never elected all, they only elected one Latino candidate, although they elected him in multiple elections. The opportunity to elect district was probably 15 in that eastern Phoenix area, where I think Commissioner Freeman was attempting, in terms of rough approximation, was attempting to build a minority district. So I guess the other issue, in addition to the Anglo areas that may be of concern to Commissioner Herrera, the other issue is what's happening to these Hispanic voters who were in Old 25, and if they're not in a minority district, where are they? When I look at the, are they in a minority district where their vote is, where they do have an opportunity to elect? Or are they being taken out of a district where they have an opportunity to elect?
Okay,
that
well,
would be a
since we're
concern.
just creating and trying things out, why don't we try what Mr. Freeman suggested, which essentially follows the Minority Coalition's lines with an additional 4th district added on, and we'll see, you know, how we can possibly create others and also how this works. We don't have perfect information, as we know, and until more analysis gets done on how these are drawn, we're kind of going in the dark, so we just have to try things and see how they fit together.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I would be in agreement with that, but I still want to, state my reasons or the issues that I have with that particular district. And I think I would also compare that particular district, which I think is 28 in Mr. Freeman's map, to when the Navajo Hopi were combined with the city of Flagstaff, where you had sort of the same dynamic. You had overwhelming population, probably Native American, but you had the city of Flagstaff that has a strong voting base, so they would dilute the Native American population. And I see the same dynamic possibly happening in 28. So again, I want to raise some of the concerns, but I would agree with you, as again, this is something that we're working on. I would agree to put it in with the map that Mr. Desmond is creating for us.
Ms.
Chair,
McNulty?
just the thought that in terms of another coalition district, there might be an opportunity in rural Pinal County. Also, so I don't think any of us have the energy to do that tonight, but when we move on from the 4 majority-minority districts in Phoenix and think about coalition districts, that might be another place that we want to at least consider.
We have looked at that. Mr. Freeman comes close to a coalition district with his 11, I guess, which is I think it's 51% white. So it's close. The one thing we do want to flag there is, when we did the prison report on that area, it was 18,000 people were in prison, so almost a tenth of the district is in prison. So that while there is a large minority population, it's likely that a sizable chunk of that is incarcerated.
That doesn't work.
So that's something to keep in mind whenever we're looking at the Pinal County districts, especially if we wanted to make one of them a majority-minority. We have to be very careful about the prison population.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I just want to thank Mr. Desmond for keeping that in mind. I know that's an issue that I think most of the commissioners are aware of, and also the public has been concerned about that, so I appreciate you raising that issue.
And that's something that Joe and Mary initially flagged.
Well, I'm thanking you, but let me thank our legal counsel as well. So, thank you.
Okay, so you'll be adopting those 3 well, actually 4 from Mr. Freeman, because the 3 are essentially the same as the submission from the Minority Coalition.
Okay, and I don't know how everybody wants to, I don't know how you guys want to proceed right now. I think it would be doable if I were to have a little time to draw up a map that would have those 7 districts that we've kind of agreed to at least use as a kind of a merging point, ready to go right now, in maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. And then you guys we could either continue working tonight to try to find a 5th one in Maricopa, or I could hopefully send you on your way with that, or I could probably email that to you guys later this evening, however you want to proceed. And then I don't know, Mary might have something to say also.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I'd like to do that if Mr. Desmond needs about 30 minutes. You think 30 minutes would be enough?
I think so.
Take a quick break. I'm actually hungry, and I don't want to eat the paper in front of me. So we either take a 30-minute break and come back and have the map that Mr. Desmond is presenting to us. I would be in favor of that.
I'm tired. I'd like to take a 12-hour break.
I would like to eat 2 in my house.
You going to your house?
Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock, so.
Let's make that a 14-and-a-half-hour break, just to correct myself.
Madam Chair, just one quick thing. And this is just my, from my side, I missed football practice because of this, and I want to make sure that we are able to get as much done as possible tonight. And I understand we're all tired and hungry, and we would prefer to go home, but if we can get as much done tonight and not have to meet Saturday and or Sunday, that to me, that would be, I think that would be ideal, as opposed to going home and with the possibility of having to meet again further tomorrow and Friday and then Saturday and Sunday. But that, again, I understand that we're all tired and hungry, but I would be willing to do that.
Okay, other thoughts on that?
Request to sleep. Yeah, I don't think, you know, what I can do tonight, what I have left tonight is not enough to assure you that we wouldn't have to meet Saturday or Sunday, I don't think. Okay. I'm beat.
Okay, do we want to go, I don't think having Mr. Desmond work for half an hour and us coming back is an option, so it's either we do a little bit more now and then adjourn for the evening, or we adjourn now, but I don't want to do a break and come back.
Do we have public comment?
Yes, we have 4, if they're here. One is, 2.
I think there's an executive director's report Tuesday.
Yeah, is Ray here? Oh, okay.
And
He is.
Madam-
Mr. Freeman?
Yeah, I would just suggest maybe we do the executive director report and take some public comment and adjourn for the evening.
Mr. Bladine?
I just have a couple things I wanted to bring to your attention. We have made arrangements for backup locations for Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Saturday, Sunday would be at the Sheraton Phoenix Airport Hotel, which is actually in Tempe, just down the street. And we have that as a tentative. And I guess I'm asking start time at 9:30 on Saturday, perhaps 1 o'clock on Sunday. And then Monday we would be in Tucson, and we also have 4 Point Sheraton University Park, 1900 East Speedway, located for Tucson on Monday. So if you all, unless there's something different, we'll go ahead and tie those dates down, and if you don't need them, we'll cancel them, but at least we'll have them posted for action. I guess for Saturday we have to post tomorrow before 9:30. So I'll get a generic posting for discussion and mapping. The second thing is the second round public hearings, and I hate to bring these up because they make me tired looking at them, so I got to think they make you tired too. Christina, I think late today sent you out a revised second round that is pretty much what she'd sent you, I think, day before yesterday, but we got more specific facilities tied down. The main thing that we wanted to ask you to do as you can is to please let us know what meetings you could cover, so we make sure that we don't set meetings that we won't have a commissioner able to attend. And I think those are really the, unless Christina wants to add something, I think that's really it. She made good progress today with the staff to tie down locations. I think she maybe has, looking at her list, 5 or 6 that aren't confirmed. So we're doing pretty well on that.
Good.
Without any questions, I'll...
Mr. Herrera?
No, I don't have any questions other than I'm thanking Ms. Gomez for all the work she's done on securing those locations and getting as many of the second round public hearings scheduled. So I know it's a lot of work, so thank you.
And on those future meeting dates, they sound, the times and places all sound good. I
All
think
right.
we need to schedule for Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Yeah, any other questions or comments from anyone? Okay.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
I do have a question for Mr. Desmond. The four majority minority districts in Maricopa County that were basing it on Mr. Freeman's map. What I want to know, is it possible to use the minority coalition's exact maps and still use that legislative 28 that Mr. Freeman created? So the exact same map that the coalition provided us with legislative 28 as Mr. Freeman created, is that a possibility?
I don't think to use the exact. We were just discussing one thing that we. So I believe it is District 28 in this map. Is that the one? Or 29? So 29 in Commissioner Freeman's map is slightly different than the majority or the minority coalitions, and it has the other ones are also slightly different, but more closely follow their numbers. District 29 might need to be bolstered a little bit in Commissioner Freeman's in order to get it a little closer to the benchmark, but I think part of that the conflict between the reason that his is a little lower is because part of it does go to 28 to make that another majority minority. So there is a chance that we're going to have to reshuffle these a little bit, but I don't think it's possible to take the three minority coalition districts and also have 28 be a majority minority district.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I would prefer to do that, to get those three majority minority districts as close to the minority coalition's maps as possible, and then creating Commissioner Freeman's legislative 28 majority minority district. I think that would make more sense, because as I said, I want to honor the request, and again, there's really not much compromise on these majority minority districts, so I would like to see if it's a possibility.
Mr. Freeman, would you be open to that?
No.
Okay, then we'll go with Mr. Freeman's as they're drawn for now, and we'll see how that works in the map.
Okay.
So is there anything else on the legislative that we need to talk about for Mr. Desmond? Do you guys have any comments for us that you think we need to be thinking about or considering?
I guess my question would be, assuming I have this map done, are you likely to load this map and start working with it tonight, or is it something that needs to be done for tomorrow morning? Just that's a selfish question.
Well, if we're
because there's a baseball game that I was.
That's what I thought.
Madam Chair?
Okay.
Mr. Herrera?
If we're leaving because we're tired, then I suspect that we probably don't want to look at maps tonight.
Well, I have no problem looking at maps tonight. I'm just wondering if this is something that you guys need in the next hour, or if it's something I can get you later tonight.
I don't need it in the next hour.
I do not need it in the next hour as well.
You don't? Okay. So we don't need it in the next hour.
Okay. Well, then I'll have for tomorrow morning, we'll have a map that'll have the original grid lines, except for 7 districts that are majority minority districts.
Mm-hmm.
And so there will be parts that are unassigned and parts that are underpopulated. We can work on adjusting the rest of that tomorrow. And again, finding a 5th district in Maricopa that's either a plurality, a coalition, or at least a strong ability to elect.
Sounds good.
It's probably the first priority then. And then from there you can argue over all the other lines.
Okay. Ms. McNulty?
Do you have tickets to the baseball game?
I have a ticket, yes.
Right. We need to let Mr. Desmond.
It's all right. It's all right.
No,
that
it's
shouldn't
not.
be a consideration.
It's not all right. You need to go.
Anything from legal counsel on that?
No.
Okay. Okay. Then let's just check the agenda.
Madam Chair, do we need Mr. Desmond here for public comment?
I don't think so. Although, yeah, I don't think anybody's wanting to present a map. Let me just.
All right. I'll just check. Buck, are we allowed to leave our stuff here for the night? Are we in the same room? Okay.
Enjoy.
Have a good night. Thank you, everybody.
So our next, is there anything on the Attorney General inquiry? Okay, so agenda item 6 we have covered, and that leaves us with just a few more public comment, and then we'll adjourn. So my first one is Richard Tracy from Mesa. I think he left. Shirley Dye, representing Self from Northern Arizona.
Commissioners, Shirley Dye, D-Y-E, from Payson, and I am in obvious support of option number 1 of version 8A. The reason being twofold. Let me start out discussing option number 2. Option number 2 splits Gila County into District 6, District 12, and District 7. And that's too reminiscent of the 3 supervisoral districts we have just completed, where we have been working very, very hard to tie the northern part of the county and the southern part of the county together as a unit. Over the years, there's been some hurt feelings, and we finally worked through all that. And to see our county and Legislative District 5, as we have known it, split into 3 and even 4 different districts is really a horrifying thought. We've built relationships. The rural Arizona of the District 5 of option number 1, it does, I know you were supposed to start from scratch. However, this does, the Graham, the Greeley, the Navajo, the Apache, and Gila County is very, very well balanced with your ethnic minorities. We have Hispanics, we have Native Americans, we have whites, we have some others. We even have some Koreans and Chinese, especially up in the Gila County area and in the White Mountains areas. We have very, very similar communities of interest, very, very similar economic issues, tourist issues, and all that. As far as the rest of the map goes, going back to option number 2, it looks very, very gerrymandered to me. I do agree, and I'm just really sorry we haven't gotten some more of our San Carlos Apache to these meetings, but because the Navajo says the San Carlos Apaches want to be with them doesn't necessarily make it so. And just because Mr. Titla has come here and to the Pine Top meeting and said it is so does not make it overall so. So keep that in mind. In working with we just did our redistricting. We've been working a lot with the San Carlos Apache and the Tonto Apache, which is right up by Payson, in working with our redistricting. So we have been talking to them. The fact that I've been networking. You know, I went to the Flagstaff public meeting before. I went to the Pine Top publicly meeting, and I went to the Prescott public meeting. I went to all 3 of them, and I listened really well. And I have lots of people out there that I do network with, and I have heard, and you had Friday, you had a gal down here, Joy, who was talking about that the majority of Flagstaff people don't necessarily agree with what your Flagstaff 40 people have been telling you. And there are a lot of other people that do want Flagstaff to be separated out from the Navajo Nation that they have been with over the last 10 years. So I agree that option number 1 placing Coconino and Yavapai in the same district makes a very, very balanced district politically, if you are looking at competitiveness, more so than the option number 2, which really runs number 6 kind of gerrymandered through there, and so those are the issues that I am obviously most concerned with. On the other hand, the Voting Rights Act does not guarantee that you can elect a minority candidate. It just says you have the right, your right to elect cannot be diluted. And so diluting minority rights in different areas I can see. But taking on and trying to create new districts when there's not necessarily, they don't already necessarily exist, where they're way spread out and you're trying to capture these people to make a minority district, that to me doesn't seem altogether right. So, let's see, what else was I going to say? I would like to see what would happen if you took the Yuma sector, the blue and the green there, and maybe had 2 vertical districts. I know maybe geographically that wouldn't work, but I would like to see the lineup so that you can have more border representation with legislative districts. So if you could try to do 4 teen and 4 vertically instead of horizontally, so that there is, and see how you could, I wish your gentleman had not left, because I very much would have liked to see from option number 2, you know, where you take this area here and keep this county area together and this here area here, and just see how you could do that so you would have more representation on border issues. I also think this area of Cochise down here where you've picked up Bisbee and Douglas, I think that's gerrymandering and trying to take away from the Cochise County as a whole county. I really like the whole county's concept, and I think that that's why I prefer option 1 way better than option 2. But if you're looking at the southwest corner of the state there, I would like to see the 2 vertical districts instead of horizontal, and see how that could look. I think that's it. I'll let you know tomorrow if they have something different to say.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kelly Townsend, Greater Phoenix Tea Party from Gilbert.
You need me to spell my name? Townsend. It's Kelly Townsend. And I am here to talk some more about Gilbert tonight. First I wanted to thank you guys. It looks like it's Congressional District 5 that's in this proposed map. Thank you very much for keeping Gilbert intact. And with that, it looks like it went up Mesa Drive, like we had talked about, so that's fantastic. So thank you.
Are you referring to which map?
Well, unless I missed something, because we've been kind of busy with another issue, but the commission approved congressional draft map.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And then now concerning legislative districts, right now it's currently legislative district 22, which has been primarily all of Gilbert, Gold Canyon, some of Apache Junction, a portion of Mesa. But as you guys know, Gilbert was one of the fastest growing towns in the country, if not, I think it was the fastest growing town. And so now I think it's actually the population is too large to be contained into one legislative district, which my understanding is 213,000. And so the town residents number approximately 208,000, which leaves a 5,000 difference, and I know we have to have at least that in our county islands. So, excuse me, we understand that Gilbert's going to have to be split. The question is where, and I've seen a couple of maps. One, I can't tell the streets, but it looks like Gilbert split directly in two, north and south. Commissioner Freeman's map, however, keeps Gilbert as a community of interest, but then it was brought up that it's possible that there's 3 school districts in there, that it splits 3 school districts. So I just wanted to make some recommendations. If you look at that, I know you're not to that area yet, but when you get to that area, to give you a little geographic information about that, the 202 was recently completed down there, and Power Ranch is south of the 202, south of Germain, if I'm correct. So if you're going to look at the south border of what this district would look like, Germain Road would be one of the options. Geographically, the 202 would be an obvious, but we've had a lot of residents say we want to see it go down at least to Germain, which isn't much more south than the 202. And the other thing is where is the Higley School District? And I can get that information to you guys at our next meeting. But what was brought up was there's Gilbert Unified School District, and then there's Higley School District, which I do believe Higley is also south of the 202, and from Higley east and south of the 202. So I'll find that out and get that to you as well. And then the natural boundaries are Power Road to the east is dividing Mesa and Gilbert. Baseline to the north over to Gilbert Road, going down on the west side. And the Gilbert Road kind of does its own little gerrymandering for the town anyway. So, but what we need to look at the most is that southern boundary, what would make the most sense. And I will also, I'm working really hard to get the county islands. Do you guys have that, what the county islands population is? Do you have that already? Okay, so you don't need to have that. So I'm sure that your mapping guy can figure that out, but we would just, what the residents are asking for is somewhere Germain and south to be in another. And the other point I wanted to make too about that is that community, the Power Ranch community, just naturally goes into Queen Creek. They're very agricultural. It's hard to tell the difference between the two. So I think that's it for now. But just wanted to thank you again, and then to try and ask again to keep Gilbert as a community of interest together in one legislative district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Linda Milhaven, Vice Mayor, City of Scottsdale. Unless she left. Okay. So that's the end of public comment. Out of request to speak forms. Thank you all for for coming out tonight and for your comment. That leaves one item left on the agenda, and that's adjournment. So I'll declare this meeting adjourned. The time is 7:20 p.m. Thank you.